Alright, we are live. This preview is a little bit behind, but that was a little bit distracting. Alright, welcome to HUMANE Mind Live, episode 110. And I ran so far away, I ran all night and day. That's the title of today's episode. It's been a while. I have been away for 2 weeks. I have been at death's door with the Plague 2.0. Not really, but I have been sick, and my entire apartment complex has been. You can hear people hacking and coughing up and down the hallways. Was not the flu, thankfully, so no puking or anything like that. Although I think I might have preferred that because then it would have been over sooner. But I have been just and my entire sinuses and airway have been clogged with mucus and all that. And then even I was taking everything I could take, NyQuil and Mucinex at the same time, and nothing was really helping. So, wasn't able to stream, but a lot of stuff was happening over the last few weeks. The biggest piece of news was we dodged a bullet-ish. I'm not quite sure how that happened. So, let me give you a little bit of the background that most people were talking just about the Soleimani guy and getting bombed, but they weren't talking about what led up to that. And I've heard a really good podcast on this from Tom Woods and Scott Horton. So Scott Horton is kind of an expert on war-related, war things and all like that. Although his particular perspective I disagreed with, but his factual information about the history of the U.S. and Iran was really valuable information. It was actually the most in-depth I've heard about the backstory and the U.S.'s relationship in that area. So, according to him, this is kind of our fault, the entire situation. Basically, what started all of this is in December. There was a rocket attack against the U.S. or against either a U.S. facility or a U.S. embassy, but nobody ended up dying. And in retaliation to that, the U.S. Attacked a facility. This is prior to Soleimani's death. This is So they launched an attack against a facility, but that facility was controlled by a Sunni faction. So there's a Sunni and the Shia, right? And usually the Shia are the more militant ones. Those are the ones we've always had a problem with, the Shia. And usually it was the Sunnis that were kind of more mellow and all that sort of things. Although the Sunnis have also had issues with us. When it comes to Iraq, although Saddam Hussein wasn't really religious in any way, but he was more along the lines of the Sunni side. And so when the U.S. has been in the Middle East, usually we've sided with Sunni factions to fight the Shiites. So the facility that was attacked was actually a group that we had been working with in the past. Now, during the attack on Iraq and during the Iraq War, when the U.S. was capturing prisoners, and this is the whole, what's that called? Was it Abu Dhabi? I think it was, where the U.S. soldiers were torturing, suspected terrorists and things like that. Was it Abu Dhabi?
Oh, is that where they got in trouble for
yeah. I don't remember the name of that facility. But the U.S. was basically taking potential terrorists and torturing them. But in addition to that, we were also taking those people and we were sending them to the Sunnis. And the Sunnis were doing, the U.S.'s mistreatment of the, prisoners of war. was pretty bad. But it was things like starvation and, humiliating them. But when the Sunnis got a hold of them, there was things like beheading and, actual torture, like, dismemberment and, body torture, not humiliation, and making them listening to heavy metal and stuff like that. The treatment of the prisoners within that facility was below the standard expected of the U.S., but when we weren't doing that with them, with the prisoners of war, we were sending them to the Sunnis, and they were throwing them off of buildings or, actually drowning them or things along those lines. And so it was that faction of Sunni that we attacked in retaliation for the rocket attack against the U.S. facility. I can't remember if that was the embassy or if that was a separate facility. Sorry, my knowledge of it is kind of limited. I was kind of more going with what the experts were saying. So the Sunnis are actually the group that make up the majority of Iran's actual police force and military force. And the Sunnis looked at us and they're like, hey, we didn't do the basically Iran was saying, hey, we're not the ones attacking you and your facilities. That's some other groups. That's not us. And so then they went and protested at the actual embassy. And those were police forces and military forces that were protesting at the embassy. And that was a peaceful protest. As far as I know, nobody was injured. There was no damage to the facility. The people protesting went onto U.S. soil because it is the embassy, whatever, and that's considered U.S. soil. And the protesters went beyond where they were allowed, although the forces protecting the embassy let them into that area. So that's the part that was the most confusing to me, because it was that protest is the reasoning why Donald Trump was like, okay, we are now going to attack this military facility in retaliation for the protest on our embassy. That's the part that doesn't make any sense to me, because that's the part that seems, regardless of the whole situation, okay, yeah, they attack us with some, with force, even though the rocket attack didn't kill anybody or anything like that. Yes, attacking a facility seems kind of like tit for tat, right? That's just a regular kind of back and forth. We see this between Israel and some of the factions around them. There'll be rockets launched at Israel, and in retaliation, Israel will attack a facility, and
Okay, so this is a different facility then, because you were saying that we bombed a Sunni facility, and that's why they were protesting.
Yes.
So then after we did it on a different facility.
Yeah. So there was an attack from groups that were maybe Sunni, maybe not. That's not clear. An attack against a U.S. facility. The Sunnis were blamed for that, and there was an attack against their facility. And then the Iran army, or the Iran police force, it was mostly the Iran police force, although there was other people involved in the protest. They go on the U.S. embassy, and they're protesting like, hey, we're on your side. Don't attack us. This was uncalled for. Nobody was injured during that protest. No property damage or anything like that. There hasn't been any reports of anything. But in response to that protest, that's when Trump attacked the facility and killed Soleimani and another general of the Iran military force. So Soleimani and some other guy, I don't remember his name because he's apparently not important, although as far as I know, or as far as I was listening to, it sounded like he was also a general, but Soleimani was the head general. It was like he's kind of like the 4-star general or I guess maybe closer to a 5-star general during war in the U.S. So there's generals, but he was the top general that they were reporting to. But he was a member of a Sunni group, and the presidents and Republicans and all that are kind of spinning this ultimately it was a good thing, because Soleimani was a bad guy. He does have a rap sheet of American bodies, American soldiers, and helping terrorists fight the U.S. So his hands aren't clean. but he was one of the people that helped us previously, like during Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Those were the groups that we were siding with. So there's a history of the U.S. working with these guys, and there's a history of these guys also being responsible for U.S. casualties. That's so.
Well, the odd thing about this is if there are factions within Iran, the Sunnis that we have previously been working with, and then there's what are they, the Shiites or something, that I guess is the primary opposition. But you stated that most of the police force and military are Sunni.
Most of them, because we're the ones who helped put them into power. We worked with them. We hey, we're gonna put you guys.
So Soleimani, did he have quite a bit of terrorist activity against the U.S. or it was mostly elsewhere?
Yeah, so he had history of either being involved in terrorists. Yeah. So we worked with him and his group, and we were sending them prisoners of war so they could deal with them and that sort of thing. But these guys are also responsible for IED attacks and destroying our convoys and things along those lines. So it's kind of But listening to this for Scott Horton describe the situation, Scott Horton seemed to be on the side of the Iranis and the Sunnis and be adamantly defending them. And I'm looking at the situation, I'm like, we just need to stop picking people over there, because every time we side with one faction, they turn on us and start killing us. We can't pick a winner.
Yeah, I don't think we have with any Middle Eastern incursion or anybody that we've tried to ally ourselves with other than Israel.
That has been our history in the Middle East the entire time. The U.S. is responsible for Al-Qaeda because we teamed up with Al-Qaeda to fight against the Russians during the Cold War. We created Al-Qaeda to fight against the Russian factions. They were our proxies in that. And Al-Qaeda became our enemy. And then we wiped out Al-Qaeda, and in order to wipe out Al-Qaeda, we were working with groups that eventually became ISIS. We wiped out ISIS. And then all of this, every time we work with a group and let them, in order to fight our enemy, they become the new enemy. And that's kind of what was going on here.
So it seems that this is actually inadvertently has caused a proper tactic for the U.S. And in the fact that Soleimani was bombed.
Yeah.
And in the retaliation we got for that, nothing happened. They shot out 24 missiles, but they actually there were reports that there were warnings that Iran actually contacted individuals in Iraq to give us a heads up and state, hey, we're sending bombs in this area, clear out.
So
just want to show that we're aggressive and will retaliate, but we really don't want to hurt anybody.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Even though Soleimani was a high-ranking member of the Iran military, he is, depending on who you talk to, he's either a great person in Iran or he is the most horrible and corrupt, he was the most horrible and corrupt person, because he attacked his own people. He's responsible for the deaths and torture of Iran citizens as well. So his hands aren't clean when it comes to U.S. citizens and U.S. soldiers, and his hands aren't clean for Iran citizens either. Although he was celebrated in that country and was treated like this great military leader, there's large factions in Iran that also hated him.
And, a bunch of people celebrating Obama and how he was the greatest president ever, and in their minds he's, the golden god of presidents, while the rest of the country is like, no, I think he kind of screwed us over quite a bit, and you guys just don't see it.
Yeah, although it's kind of more along the lines of Saddam Hussein, where the majority of the citizens don't like him, but he's still celebrated as long as he's in power. I think that's kind of more of the relationship. The more I'm thinking,
not full blown like Hitler dictator, starting wars with countries, but just kind of, if you say something bad, it could be bad for you while he's in power. Yeah. So some of us will pretend we like the guy. The rest, I don't care.
Yeah. I don't. So that's why I think. So this is where it gets into a little bit of speculation territory.
Don't actually want to fight anybody.
Yeah. So Iran's response for this attack that killed Soleimani and the other guy, that leads me to think Iran wanted him gone too. The response to that, it should have been more. It should have been possibly the start of an all-out war, which is what a lot of leftists were fearing, and they came out in defense like, "Oh, we're so sorry that this Soleimani guy died," and then they had to walk it back when they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, this guy's not such a good guy."
But that actually makes sense because they were supposed to be consulting with the imam,
mm-hmm.
and then he was making claims of direct retribution or something.
Yeah.
But if they're not happy with the higher, one of their highest generals that has been causing trouble abroad and within their own country, but they can't really show their public face as turning against their own public officials.
Yeah.
Mom can't come out and say, you know what, we're tired of you messing around. You're putting us in a bad light. We're having trouble, on the world stage, and you're already attacking our own people as well.
Yeah. Because
they have to save face, which seems like that's what this missile, the last missile attack where they sent out the 12 or 24 missiles, was again try and save face among their people, but they screwed up because they shot down their own plane. Well, it wasn't their plane; it was it a Turkish airliner?
Yeah, so that I'm not sure of. I know they launched a bunch of missiles and didn't really do anything. So no American casualties, and
majority of them just hit out in the dirt somewhere, quite a ways off from any sort of buildings. But there was a passenger airliner that they shot down. They claimed it wasn't them at first, but the U.S. is like, you're the only one shooting missiles then at all, like on the planet. Of course, guys, and they finally had to come out and admit it. And then there was big riots because now with their retaliation, they were claiming, we killed so many American soldiers, and this is what they get for messing with us. And then it turns out the only people they killed was their own again.
Yeah, so that's the other thing is there's propaganda in Iran where they're claiming that was a devastating attack against the U.S. military, and the U.S. is like, our casualties are zero. We don't even have anybody in the hospital over this. So that seemed to me, that's where I'm like, yeah, okay, that is Iran trying to save face. They're like, yeah, well, we just got attacked, but the U.S. kind of did us a favor because Soleimani he's a fundamentalist, kind of a radical for his religious views. So he was kind of uncontrollable in that regard for them.
The Ukrainian plane, that's what it was.
Ah.
There was like 170 people on there.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard anything about that. So that is new information.
Yeah, that was the exact same night.
Yeah.
They shot out missiles, and then I think they didn't tell the airliners in their country, hey, stop the flights because missiles are flying. So they saw something flying through the air and didn't realize it was from their own airport.
Wow.
Shot a missile at it, blew it up, and half that flight was Iranians.
Wow.
So even if they were trying to save face and, possibly get rid of Soleimani, they still ended up killing their own people and probably just screwed things up even worse for themselves because after that, there were riots.
Yeah. So
and now people are just not happy with their government at all.
Oh, yeah. And that's
even worse than before.
So hopefully that leads to something hopefully that leads to the people rising up against their government and actually getting Iran back to where it was in, say, like the 80s. So Iran is one of those countries that 70s and 80s, if you look at pictures, it looks very similar to the U.S. as far as the, cities and what people are wearing and all that sort of stuff. But right now, it is kind of a militant Islamic state. It wasn't like that 40 years ago, which is very, now it's the law of the land that all women have to, be completely covered, like wearing their burqas or.
Well, it's probably because I think I guess an estimate or a guess would be, yes, it's always been Islamic, but they've had so many different factions over however many time. There are a lot of peaceful Islamic people. I think a lot of them were trying to modernize.
Yeah.
Similarly, Christianity went out of like the Dark Ages and went out of the super strict Roman Orthodox Church way back in the during the Spanish Inquisition, and the church kind of became more friendly, less strict, less, hey, everyone's going to burn in hell if you don't go into a church. Kind of got rid of that mentality. I think the Islamic religion may have started to go through that until outside influence, mostly from Western countries.
Yeah.
Coming in to seize the oil fields, basically using them as piggy banks, profits.
Yep, and
because of that, they had to partner up with certain sects versus other sects, and so they started fighting, and so the religious, I guess, this higher pious religious people over there started kind of becoming the voice of the people again, which is typical, not just in the Middle East, but in a lot of places.
Yeah, it's because of mostly U.S. involvement in the Middle East that these groups of religious fundamentalists got into political power.
And because the idea of like the Western devils and death to America and all that, why weren't we having that in the early 1900s? World War I, nobody even heard of that. Wasn't a thing.
It's like a period of almost 100 years in that area where they were starting to modernize a lot of things. You could going back and looking at these pictures, you're like, wait, that's Middle East? Wait, that's a Middle East country during the 70s and 80s, 60s? That looks, that's very reminiscent of the kind of the golden age in the U.S., the 1950s. That's kind of like the, maybe not ideal, because we still had, rampant racism and stuff like that. But when you're talking about, prosperity and trying to modernize as much as possible, like the 1950s, that was, kind of the U.S. at its best. Granted, not perfect, but hey, there's definitely steps in the right direction there. And you look at the Middle East during, the 20 years after that, 70s and 80s, and it seemed like it was along those same paths. And while the U.S. has made kind of transitions to more, we haven't eliminated racism, but politically, racism is removed from our government and all that sort of stuff. But
it's not really acceptable in society.
So society-wise, and they got to this, I guess, a similar situation in their governments, but because of wars and all that sort of thing, they went kind of the opposite direction into a radical fundamentalist perspective. So they were kind of in that same area. They were just probably 20 or 30 years behind the U.S., and when they got to that point in their history, rather than having a civil rights movement and opening that up and then becoming kind of a leftist movement towards LGBT and all that sort of stuff, they went, we're just going to go back to an older way of thinking where women are second-class citizens. And because it used to be a while where, granted, there's still a large portion of women in the Middle East that are going to college and things like that, but that used to be kind of the norm. But
if we started moving in, because after World War II, our dependency on fossil fuels shot up substantially. All the industries that boomed up due to World War II, manufacturing plants, stuff like that, automobile sales, everything just started shooting up. We became more dependent, started fiddling around in the Middle East, and if this was the impression that we gave Muslims that were trying to kind of modernize and get to a kind of have their own, I guess not Renaissance, but Enlightenment period, that might be a better description. If they were working towards that, and then they look over and see a bunch of people from the West coming and taking all their stuff, siding with one faction to help get rid of another faction so we can make arrangements to, hey, we're taking your oil, I think that would piss some people off and say, you know what, we're not going.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing that when I was listening about, it was oh, that's the cause of the protest against the embassy. I'm like, no, those guys those guys were right. They're like, hey, we're not you were just working with us and you're still working with us. So Soleimani was doing reviews of U.S. troops just a couple of months before he ended up dying. It's like, okay, worst guy ever, totally deserved to be assassinated in a drone strike. Wait, he was just at a military base with U.S. soldiers, going through and inspecting them as they're standing at attention. It's like, am I missing something here? Because that's what the police are like, are just like, what the fuck, dude? We were just working with you. What is the reason? Because that's like, so there's a bit of history where the U.S. every time we pick somebody, they end up being our enemy. But there's also the like, every time we are working with somebody and we have a good working relationship, we also provoke them, and they're kind of at their limit. They're like, yeah, we work with the U.S. and we get screwed over, and they work with us and they get screwed over.
Who fed that information to Trump and his cabinet, and the generals advising him to go retaliate and attack this facility? How would we have not known that's a Sunni facility? Where did they get information?
We knew it was a Sunni facility.
Why are we attacking them if we're supposed to be working with them? Who came up with that idea?
I don't know. So as far as I can tell, Trump is just listening to the advice of the generals. I mean, granted, that's an advisable thing to do, but most of the people who are in the military and are his general advisors, they are warmongers. They are a hammer, and everything is a nail to them. That's
what it's sounding like, and I think Trump's kind of a take action guy. So when he hears some brief news, hey, this is happening, well, fine, let's take some action. That sounds good. Let's bomb them.
Yeah. So thankfully, that could have started World War III, or at least a major conflict.
And it would have been a conflict. They don't have the technology. I mean, well, it could have had some bad things, but if it became more of an actual drawn-out war, they wouldn't have stood a chance.
No. So Iran wouldn't have been the problem. The problem would have been other countries siding with Iran. That could have been the catalyst. So, yeah, if it was just us versus Iran, no, Iran is dog meat. They don't even stand a chance. Like Iraq, we won the Iraq war within 2 weeks. Iran would be kind of a similar situation.
So it would be something more along the lines of if Russia hopped in to say, we can be up, an ally will protect you because we've been trying to invade.
So that's the other thing is, Russia has been, so the Sunnis are working with the Russians as well. So if they're kind of like, hey, this is our opportunity and we're going to side with the Sunnis over the Americans,
that's who I was thinking of. Sorry, side tangent. I was thinking Trump kind of reminds me of Mr. Magoo. Like, he stumbles onto good fortune, even though it should have all been a gigantic mess. Yeah. Because, like, pretty much everything with his entire administration, he first gets in there and they go to attack him and state, hey, you're working with the Russians and you are tampering with our election. But somehow mysteriously it turns out the only way they could try and prove that is they went and worked with the Russians. Everything they said they were trying to blame him for, the only way they could even do that is they went to go get information from Ukraine and the Russians.
Yeah.
And so it maybe that's how he's had good fortune. Maybe, he is a good salesman, but he may be just a lucky dude because you're right.
Yeah, so looking at the Iran situation, that just seems like a stroke of luck. Because that was a major attack against Iran. Like, they lost military... It wasn't just like previous attacks. It was like, yeah, we lost a couple of, random soldiers, but, he attacked our air facility, but that was back up in 24 hours. Yeah, it's annoying, but it's not... But it's like, well, this was a major strike where they lost key figures in their military. That's something that could be grounds for, like, okay, that's it. That's the last straw. This is all-out war. And yet Iran just launched a couple missiles, didn't kill anybody, and then they're like, yep, we're done. I was like, that...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You weren't even aware of the airliner that got shot down. Why would that even happen? How did they mess up that bad where they shot down their own people, and now their government, not only did they try and pretend that they retaliated, but if information comes back that they warned us in the first place, and the only ones that died were their own people from their own hands, that just completely blew up in their face out of happenstance. That wasn't even planned. It's not like Trump said, okay, if we bomb Soleimani, they may accidentally shoot down an airliner. Nobody could have seen that coming.
Yeah, no, yeah. So it's, the airliner definitely seems like an accident. That seems like incompetence on the part of Iran.
Yeah.
They couldn't have warned the Americans beforehand, and they couldn't have warned the airliners beforehand, because you tell your airline, hey, don't send any planes on this night. That raises red flags. That's what's in the military that's called OPSEC. It's not like, it's not the actual plans of the military action, but if you start to see like
something out
lunch, yeah, you're like, oh, hey, for some reason they changed their supply deliveries. So usually they get food supplies every 2 weeks, and then they cancel it for the next month and a half. Something's up. That sort of thing. So it's kind of like, wait a minute, if they ground all planes for some night in Iran, something's up. That would have people investigating and figuring out more stuff. But yeah, that was strangely, that was the end of it. And it's like, it seemed like Iran was kind of like, hey, this works out kind of in our favor, but they had to make the reaction, or they had to, like, we can't just do nothing, so let's launch these missiles. It seems like hitting the airliner was definitely a mistake and was unexpected on their part, and now that's backfiring against them. But as long as they're saying, yeah, that's the end of the retaliation, we're good, and the U.S. is like, yeah, we're good, it's like, that could have gone so much worse, and it stumbled into the best possible case for the U.S. Not so much for Iran, because now they're probably looking at a protest kind of along the lines of what happened. Was that called the? Was that something summer, right? Was the Arab Spring? So they may be looking at something like that in Iran, where people are fed up and just.
Here's the question then, and this is kind of the interventionist mindset. And I've been listening to Ben Shapiro, and he's kind of that opinion where at least we should have small factions here and there to monitor what's going on, kind of keep the peace. But is us simply being there in the first place what's stirring up the hornet's nest? Like,
I think for the most part,
there would be nothing happening. Would Iran, Iraq, and everyone say, okay, U.S. is completely backed out. We'll go back to what we were doing, but we're done fiddling with.
Yeah, that seems to be, if we just left the area and we're just kind of like, yeah, the Middle East is all, yeah, we're just taking everybody out. Everybody goes back to the U.S. No presence there, no bases, no embassy anywhere in that area. Hey, that seems like that would be the best thing for us to do. I mean,
see, I would think so, and the only thing that we could still use to our influence would be like trade embargoes.
Yeah.
If you are starting to build a military regime and you're being a dictator and treating your citizens like pawns or puppets or abusing them or whatever, trade embargoes. You don't get to trade with the rest of the modern world. We don't deal with countries like that. Either straighten up and fall in line with coordinates that were set via the UN, or we don't do business. You're cut off.
And out of all the tactics we've used in that area, that is the only one where we've actually had success, is sanctions.
That's in China as well. That was just recent.
Yeah. That's the only way that we've actually, we actually got change, and no lives lost, no military action. Okay. That seems to be the only tool that actually has a moderate success rate, because every other tool we've tried, every other tactic, while it may have a temporary success, it seems to lead to bigger problems down the road. And I was like surprised that in this particular incident, this is like one of the few times where it seems to be everything's coming up roses, at least right now. All right. That's one of the few times we've had a military action in that region where the retaliation and all that has been not like negligible. So all right, let's move on. So yeah, there's not much more about the Soleimani, although there was the Rose McGowan thing that everybody was talking about, and how she's like kind of say, oh, so we're so sorry and all that, and then she's like, oh wait, but by the way, Soleimani was a bad guy.
Who else did that? Someone got on Twitter were they a celebrity? I think it was a dude, and was apologizing to the Iranians for Soleimani because he was basically throw out all these accolades. Now he was a wonderful guy.
And then they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, no, never mind. Now that I know who he is and actually did some research, this guy's not so great."
Yeah, man, who was that?
Yeah, I know about Rose McGowan. That's the one everybody seemed to be making a video about, but not sure about the other guy.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, not important.
Yeah, but that kind of leads us into the next thing with celebrities inputting their take on things when they don't really know what they're talking about, because that's essentially what happened with the Rose McGowan. She was saying that we are basically under the control of a tyrant and a terrorist, calling Trump that, and they're just like, oh wait, but by the way, yeah, Soleimani is also a bad guy, so
Tyrant and a terrorist, right?
Yeah, but so this happened a little bit after the Soleimani thing.
Trump is not actively invading regions. He's trying to get us out. Yeah. This is completely opposite of what Obama did. This is opposite of Bush. This is opposite of what Clinton did. This is opposite of like the whole last, 2-3 decades of presidents.
I would say I was under that impression as well, but listening to Scott Horton talk about that, it seems that's not exactly accurate, because even though Trump keeps saying we're pulling out of these areas and we're ending these conflicts, we've actually deployed more troops to areas. So that, I heard that and was kind of like, that's bizarre. And according to him, we've actually made things worse in other areas that were kind of, winding down. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know enough about that. But that's the first time I've heard anybody talking about Trump's military policy not being what he's kind of claiming it to be. So
I'll go look it up then.
Yeah. And so if that's the case, it seems like he may want to be winding down and pulling out troops. That seems to be genuine. It doesn't seem to be two-faced or anything like that. I think he is in a situation where he's relying too much on his generals and their tactics, because a lot of the people he's listening to in that regard, they seem to want war. That they see everything as, oh, we gotta, more military presence, more.
Yeah, as a threat, something we need to protect against. We need to show military might.
Yeah.
I mean, deterrence, it works, but if the only reason we have to show deterrence is because we're the ones interfering, that kind of.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, and so I do have to say, the Scott Horton perspective, he's a libertarian, so he's kind of more along the Ron Paul, and there's other people in that camp, like Tom Woods and things like that, that they're of the perspective, we need to pull back all U.S. troops from foreign, like even places like like Ramstein, where we've got this big military base in Germany. All that needs to come back. We don't need military presence.
Do that?
Because we don't need a military presence anywhere outside of the U.S. The U.S. Constitution only authorizes the military to protect the U.S. Doesn't make any sense why we would have these forward bases in other countries. How does that protect the U.S.?
Those forward bases aren't over there necessarily to protect allied countries. Those are staging points if an incursion happens, to put us closer for a quick strike, versus if we only have bases here in the U.S.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is why would we need a quick strike? That's the perspective, is why would we need a quick strike against some other country if we have all of our military just on our borders and in the U.S.? They have to come to us. Right now, most of the conflicts we get into, we're going to them. And it's like, well, if they've got to cross an entire ocean and get to us, that's. But right now, it's like, well, they don't have to cross an entire ocean. They can just get into Germany and attack a military base there. it's kind of a double-edged sword. I can see the perspective of having these forward military bases because that gives a staging point. Like, so if we actually like went to war with China or something like that, well, we would kind of be in the same boat, right? If China is at war with the U.S., they'd have to cross an ocean to get to us, but we'd also have to cross an ocean to get to them. Whereas if we have a base that's, in Asia or in Europe, it doesn't have to go as far, and it's, easier refueling stops and things like that. So that was part of the problem we had when fighting the war with Japan, is we had to set up bases on these small islands, and they were makeshift bases. They weren't very big. So everything had to be on these big battleships out in the ocean, and it's just, those things are very slow moving, and so the progress we were making in Japan wasn't all that great. Whereas if we had staging places like in, like these set up bases like we do in most of these countries, it would have been much easier for the U.S. in that particular war. But the libertarian perspective is we shouldn't be going to war at all. War is nothing but a waste, and I agree with that situation. Like, we shouldn't be going to war, although I do understand that sometimes there are times when we have to fight wars that are defensive. Like, had we stayed out of World War II, that would have been bad. Had we not involved ourselves in World War I, there wouldn't have been a World War II, and things would have been overall pretty... So, that's kind of... had we not gotten involved with World War I, we would have been fine. Europe would have been fine. It was our involvement in World War I that set up World War II, and then we had to get involved in World War II, or else it would have been bad for everybody. So there's that. War is, yeah.
It's a terrible thing, and you can't tell how much you can prepare ahead for it in order to try and maximize life. But
yeah,
it does seem the more we stick our noses out somewhere, it's just stirring up problems.
Yeah,
we have a couple of decades worth of examples of that.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So anyway, but because you started talking about celebrities, putting their opinions on topics, and they don't know anything, and Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes just ripped into him, and this whole monologue is amazing. The only thing is the way he's presenting it. It sounds like he's doing these off the cuff. But all of these jokes were pre-approved. That's the part that's kind of, This is kind of a baller thing that he did. But the fact that it was all pre-approved and all of these jokes were, they've already been screened. So that it was new for the people in the audience. It wasn't so new for him and people running the show.
Yeah, but I think that's the only way they were going to get any ratings.
Yeah.
All those award shows, even in the Oscars, they have been taking horribly just in the last 5 years. I mean, they've worst ratings ever. So I think they're trying to just do something to connect back with the people who used to watch it.
Yeah, so this was a nice change of pace compared to other similar award shows and all that. But he does have a point that it seems to be like, good job, Netflix. That was all right. So I'm going to play a bit of this.
I never did.
Yeah.
NBC clearly don't care either. 5th time. So, I mean, Kevin Hart was fired from the Oscars because of some offensive tweets. Hello? Lucky for me, the Hollywood Foreign Press can barely speak English. And they've no idea what Twitter is. So, I got offered this gig by fax. So, let's go out with a bang. Let's have a laugh at your expense, shall we? Remember, they're just jokes. We're all going to die soon, and there's no sequel. So
yeah, so there's a little bit of setup here. I guess I should have started a little bit later in the monologue, but so I don't know if you... Oh, did I send you the link for this? I don't think I did. I was hoping it would play through Hangouts, but it did not. So this is from the actual Golden Globes themselves. They released the full monologue. Trying to get to yeah, so he's just saying, hey, these are just jokes. That's set up that.
But you all look lovely, all dolled up. You came here in your limos. I came here in a limo tonight, and the license plate was made by Felicity Huffman.
Yeah, so the first joke is the Felicity Huffman, made the license plate for his limo, and Felicity Huffman is the one who's, was involved in the college scandal.
So, yeah, try to get her daughter in by bribing.
Yeah, so kind of, starts off with a light joke. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good.
No, shush. It's her daughter I feel sorry for, okay? That must be the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to her. And her dad was in Wild Hogs. So, lots of big celebrities here tonight. I mean, legends, icons, yeah? Look, at this table alone, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro. Baby Yoda. Oh, that's Joe Pesci, sorry.
Yeah, and then he makes the Joe Pesci Baby Yoda joke.
I love you, man. Don't have me whacked. But tonight isn't just about the people in front of the camera. In this room are some of the most important TV and film executives in the world. People from every background, but they all have one thing in common. They're all terrified of Ronan Farrow. He's coming for you. He's coming for you. Look, talking of all you perverts, it was a big year. It was a big year for pedophiles.
Yeah, so I don't get the Ronan Farrow joke, but the follow up to that is talking to all you perverts. that was pretty good. I'm trying to get to the better jokes.
Surviving R. Kelly, Leaving Neverland, Two Popes. Shut up. Shut up. I don't care. Many talented people of colour were snubbed in major categories. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that. The Hollywood foreign press are all very, very racist. So, fifth time. So
yeah. So then he talks about people of color being snubbed for awards, but then he's like, yeah, the people running the Golden Globes are all racist. So the Hollywood Foreign Press is, I think, the group that runs it, because he keeps making references to them. But and that's where the meme of Tom Hanks's face for that joke, because they pan to Tom Hanks after that, and just the expression on his face is like, I can't believe he just did that.
Going to do an in memoriam this year.
Oh, yeah. Okay, here's the one of the best setups, because he talks about we were going to do an in memoriam, but it wasn't diverse enough. That was one of the better bits that he did. Just that is one of the because before that he's kind of just doing little jabs at individuals and people like that, and then here he's just talking about the whole group. It's like, yeah, you guys and your woke nonsense and we got to have diversity. He's like, yeah, here's the best example of why that is absolutely stupid.
But when I saw the list of people that had died, it wasn't diverse enough. It was mostly white people.
Mostly white people.
I thought, nah, not on my watch. So maybe next year. Let's see what happens. No one cares about movies anymore. No one goes to cinema. No one really watches network TV. Everyone's watching Netflix. This show should just be me coming out going, well done, Netflix, you win everything.
Yeah, so that's the well done, Netflix part.
Good night.
So I don't know if you're following along, but that's about 3 minutes and 13 seconds where I'm at. Oh, you muted yourself. Yep, so...
Yeah, I was just trying to listen. I didn't want to feed back.
We've got to drag it out for 3 hours. You could binge watch the entire first season of Afterlife instead of watching this show. Yeah, that's a show about a man who wants to kill himself because his wife dies of cancer, and it's still more fun than this, okay?
Yeah, so that's where he talks about his afterlife, and that was the best joke of the evening for me, because he's like, oh yeah, it's a show about a man who wants to kill himself because his wife died of cancer, and he's like, oh, but there's a second season. Alright.
Spoiler alert.
Shit. So obviously he didn't die.
So in the end, he obviously didn't kill himself.
Yeah.
Just like Jeffrey Epstein.
He obviously didn't kill himself, just like Jeffrey Epstein. But so that's the good one. Yeah, that's the unexpected good joke. But the follow up to it is, oh, dude, that's the 1-2.
Oh, he's like, I know he's your friend.
Shut up. I know he's your friend, but I don't. don't care.
Yeah, because everyone's like, oh, and then he's like, I know he's your friend, but I don't care. Yeah, because that's the hypocrisy of the people. Like, they're saying, oh, I can't believe you did that. And he's like, yeah, you were the people who worked with this guy.
Yeah, how many of you out there were hanging out with this dude?
You had to make your own way here in your own plane, didn't you? Right, but seriously, most films are awful, lazy, remakes, sequels. I've heard a rumour that there might be a sequel to Sophie's Choice. I mean, that'd just be Meryl Streep going, well, it's got to be this one then. All the best actors have jumped to Netflix and HBO, you know, and the actors who just do Hollywood movies now do fantasy adventure nonsense. They wear masks and capes and really tight costumes. Their job isn't acting anymore. It's going to the gym twice a day and taking steroids, really. Have we got an award for most ripped junkie? No. No point. We know he'd win that.
Yeah, so then he talks about, I guess, this is obviously an allusion to the Marvel superhero movies and stuff like that, where it's not really so much acting as it is getting ripped and looking good on camera. And he's got a point there. Although I do like the Marvel movies, I did like pretty much everything up till Endgame, with the exception being, you know, Captain Marvel was just kind of meh, and there was a couple of films in that canon that were just kind of they were avoidable and you could still get enough out of it. Like Black Panther for me was something like, yeah, you could have skipped that film. It was pretty blah.
I mean, I like the visuals in Black Panther. I thought it was a very good looking movie, but story wise there was some stuff that just makes sense, like why are they hopping all over the globe? Why did they have to go to Hong Kong? None of that made sense.
Yeah.
Car 15 didn't make sense. You know, Warmonger's entire plan to even just get in, why couldn't he just walk in? He already had the tattoo.
Yeah, he could have just walked in. He didn't need to do any of that.
Convoluted. But yeah, I did watch Captain Marvel a second time. I think most of the undesirable parts are just, if you're familiar with Brie Larson's comments and just the perception that was put out there. But it's probably not something you can go back and watch multiple times. Like Iron Man, I've seen that one, I don't know, 3 times. A good movie. So I don't think it's quite as bad as I remember the first time, trying to look at it in more an unbiased way, but it's still, it didn't need to exist.
Yeah. So for me, like Iron Man 1 and 2 are rewatchable. 3, not so much. That one's a little bit on the boring side for me. Thor 1 and Ragnarok, although Ragnarok is the better one. Thor 1 I've rewatched a couple of times, and I think it's a good film overall. It's a little slow, but
yeah, it's got 20 moments, and it kind of sticks with the generic origin story type thing, so not too bad. Thor 2 is so boring. Ugh.
Yeah. I think Ant-Man 1 for me is actually, like, that's one of the better films. Ant-Man 2 was kind of meh. It could have been skipped.
See, I think my favorite movie is Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, Thor Ragnarok is a really good one. That's kind of like a theme park ride. That's the one that feels the most like a like a roller coaster.
Well, it has a couple of the best fight scenes ever in the entire MCU, like Thor versus Hulk.
Yeah.
And it's super epic, and then the lightning comes out, and you're like, ooh. That could have ended the fight right there. Mm-hmm. And then at the very end, when he, you know, after he gets his eye slashed and he jumps onto the bridge and it's all slow-mo and lightning's coming down, that's my most favorite scene out of the MCU ever. It's, you know, it's got Led Zeppelin playing in the background, and I mean, that's not the concept of Thor that anybody had. The lightning abilities make sense. It's in the comics. They just never showed it in the movies.
Yeah, they didn't use it to its full potential. Yeah.
So
yeah, because even when he's in the Avengers film and all that sort of thing, he's mostly relying on his hammer and being strong and flying around and stuff like that. But that movie, like, yeah, he's the god of thunder. He should actually use that.
Yeah, but I mean, that fit the song so well. The Led Zeppelin, what's that one called? Immigrant Song?
Yeah, Immigrant, yeah.
Yeah, it was just so perfect. Slow-mo, and he's coming down, lightning blowing up everybody in front of him. I was like, yep. Iron Man was way up there. Thor, I think, just kind of shot way up on my favorite superheroes.
Yeah. And then the Avengers, the first one, like, all of those are rewatchable, but of them, the Age of Ultron is kind of the weakest.
Yeah, I only watched that once.
Oh, but I think for me, although I like Ragnarok a lot, I think for me my favorite film of the entire Marvel arc so far was Civil War. I think Civil War.
Like, that is good.
Yeah, that is the most all around all around that movie has everything for me. Yeah.
I think the only thing that doesn't make sense there is the Zemo dude's overall plan. Like, how would he?
Seemed kind of just to work out for him, but you're like, how would you pre-plan all that?
Yeah, unless you can see the future, there's no way you're gonna know people are gonna be standing right there.
Yeah.
Those specific actions would take place.
Yeah, but that had that was the coolest fight scene in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe was the the Captain America and Winter Soldier versus Iron Man. That choreography on that and all that, I was like, dude, that was brilliant.
Yeah, the way they were throwing the shields around and the Winter Soldier basically was like a second Captain America. It's like they can kind of combine or is able to double his efforts. It was just really cool. So yeah, I agree. That was an awesome fight.
Yeah. So that movie is that one is the best of the whole series, but you can't have that movie without the previous ones before it, so it doesn't quite stand on its own, though. Unfortunately.
Yep.
Because you do have to have Winter Soldier is also a really phenomenal film. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I watched the first Captain America. I was like, yeah, that's not bad. Yeah. Still, Iron Man's way better. And then they get to Winter Soldier. It's like, I did not know Captain America was that badass. Who knew?
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't do that kind of fighting at all in the first movie.
Yeah, but I mean, these. So I like the movies overall, but again, so he's got a good point here that it's not really so much acting. I mean, there were good films. They're good. They're entertaining, but they're not at the same caliber for me as, say, Citizen Kane, which, I don't have a favorite film. I just kind of have a top 5. That is in my top 5, probably in my top 2. Citizen Kane.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, that's true. The MCU movies aren't fun or aren't as great because of the acting. Like Robert Downey Jr. is basically just being himself. So he was acting when he did Chaplin. When he does Iron Man, it's just like he woke up in the morning and started talking, and they're like, "Quick, roll the camera."
Yeah.
This is our movie. Whatever he's saying.
Yeah. So when it comes to film and cinema, I don't think that those will be revered as classics down the road. It's because there's been there are films that you study in classes where you're talking about cinematography or anything like that. Certain films. They will call attention to. I don't think there ever is going to be a case study on Endgame. Let's analyze every scene of Endgame and pick apart what makes this. Not so much, but people have definitely done that with films like Citizen Kane and Casablanca, Fight Club, Memento,
Godfather.
Yeah, The Godfather. Although for me, The Godfather is really boring. I did not like that film at all. I thought it was
really.
So there's I basically knew all of the main quotes from The Godfather before watching it, and before I watched Casablanca, I also knew a lot of the story and a lot of the quotes from it. So I watched Godfather first. And for me, I was like, yeah, I kind of know exactly what to expect. This is nothing new. There's nothing.
Instead of watching to find out what happens, you already had preconceptions or.
Yeah. And for me, Godfather, I was like, yeah, this was kind of. If I didn't know everything about it beforehand, it probably would have been a better film. but because I knew what to expect, I knew kind of what the scenes, I knew, oh yeah, and here's this, this great line and this quote, and I was like, yeah, I've already, heard it 1,000 times. Casablanca, I kind of expected to get a similar thing, but even though I knew every line that was coming, I knew basically the whole story going through, for some reason, that film, I was like, dude, this stands up. This film is one of the greatest of all times. Even though I know the lines, I know the story, there's nothing that surprised me. I was like, yeah, this is so well done. But when I got to to The Godfather, to me it was just kind of like, man, is this still going? Is this how long is this movie? For me, yeah, it's
I don't know. I like the family dynamic. Yeah, it was building kind of a mafia, a mob boss type atmosphere. But he wasn't doing that because he's an evil bad guy. He just did it for his family. He was just trying to provide. So I like the dynamic. The way his son kind of came in to take over, and his son was like, do-gooder guy. What was he trying to be, a lawyer or something like that?
Yeah.
He ended up just having to pick up the family business because the responsibility just fell on him, and you can feel the weight, but you can also see it changing him. I was like, yeah, I like that. That's a good way to present it. But yeah, don't watch the third one.
Yeah, I haven't watched the second or third one because I thought the first one was just so boring.
Second one, is not as good, but it is still, I think, entertaining and watchable. And the third one, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, so for me, if it comes between watching The Godfather or watching Mafia, I think I'm just gonna watch Mafia. Sorry, Jane Austen's Mafia. Like, I think the parody is better than the original.
Restaurant, and he shoots the dude in the face, and then he falls over.
And he's like, but the thing is that happened in the original. So I was like, wait, what? Because he gets shot and he takes another bite, and he's like, I was like, wait, they had that in the original? I thought that was entirely the spoof.
Well, I think that's why it's funny, is because they picked up on some just random stuff like that and just kind of drew it out.
Exaggerated, yeah. Well, the other thing is the scene where he's chasing the little kid through the garden. I was like, dude, that was almost a shot-for-shot remake.
Oh, was he chasing with like hedge clippers or something?
No, so he's got the watermelon in his mouth, and Lloyd Bridges has it like stretched out, and is like, but he actually does that in The Godfather. I'm like, whoa,
okay,
what?
Yeah, that part where his mouth is this big, boogie.
Like, I was watching, I was like, man, this was so much better in the parody.
Okay.
Here, this just seems like, why would that happen?
In the original Godfather, did that have the dude's brother that was like constantly sniffing coke? Or is that Godfather 2?
I think that is Godfather, although it's not as dramatic. Like, as Mafia exaggerated it, but so there's a little bit of that in the first one, but I think it's more pronounced in the second one. It's kind of it's very subtle in the first one.
But yeah, okay. I agree. I mean, so are there any recent movies that you've seen where it's not like a visual or stunt aspect or something, where the acting is genuinely, wow, that was good?
I think the most recent one, Joker, for me, because like that.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen one yet.
Yeah, so Joaquin Phoenix's performance in that was like, yeah, he carried the entire film. That's something that's probably gonna be a film that's people are gonna go back and analyze, because it's like, that is, although I think he was sort of method acting, like, because I think he didn't break character in between scenes. I'm not quite sure on that, but
because I mean, man, he went to extremes with the body thing. He got like the machinist. What was his name?
The Christian Bale. Yeah, so
like almost that skinny. I saw some of the.
Because I mean, the other thing is also, in certain scenes, he's holding his body in very weird positions. Well, on purpose. I mean, I'm granted, as a character, probably not, but just because of the way he was so underweight when filming, but he's just holding his body in these weird positions, because it's so unsettling when you're watching it on film. And it's like, yeah, that is. So then it is a really, yeah, his performance in that is just fantastic, and that's what, like, in The Machinist, Christian Bale is a good actor, but in The Machinist it was mostly just he's just way underweight, and then they're just scenes of his face where it seems all hollow and sunken in.
Yeah, he's walking around real slow.
And you can see his rib cage and stuff like that. But The Machinist was an okay movie, but he didn't really other than the body transformation on them, there was no like scene was like, wow, that was powerful. Whereas in The Joker, you're like, dude, that sent chills, and it wasn't just because of what you're seeing. It's also his mannerisms and his delivery of the dialogue, and it's just so uncomfortable and unsettling. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what he's supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to feel comfortable when watching this film. So, out of films that came out recently, that one for me is kind of that one stands out for me as like, yeah, that was a really good acting job on his part.
The director, right? Wasn't it the Todd Phillips guy? The did Old School, and he's like, hey, I'm
over and stuff like that. Yeah, he's the guy who was on the plane talking about somebody's, can I suck your toes?
Oh, yeah, he's trying to lick, what's her name's toes while she's just sitting there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how did you go from that to the Joker? There's a lot of other directors, but they seem to have this niche, like this, Scorsese films are Scorsese films. When watching it, he's got a lot of good stuff, but it is his style. There's like this consistent feel to most of his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that guy seems to just be all over the place. I mean, obviously Old School, one of my favorite comedies, but it is still that. It's a goofy comedy. It's not wow, that's amazing acting. And then you got people like Zack Snyder, and you can visualize some nice stuff, but overall, I don't know if he has any movies that I would consider like awesome. 300 seemed pretty good, but the older it gets, the more I'm just like, nah, a bunch of dudes with mostly ripped, somewhat painted on abs. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of airbrushing. So even though those guys are ripped and...
Did you ever see the Honest trailer for that?
I mean, I'm sure I did, but I don't remember.
They're describing, and he's like, "You've got dudes laying in the rain, playing two flutes at the same time." Just like random stuff you don't even notice in the movie, but when you're watching, like, dude, this is like a way homoerotic movie. Just all this random dudes hugging in the rain. That's hilarious. But I didn't even know there was a dude playing flutes in there, but he's like a dude playing two flutes. Like a weird split flute, and he's walking down beside everybody.
All right. Gonna say that there's a little bit more of this monologue, but I don't know if it's worth watching the rest of it, because it was just mainly that Epstein joke that was priceless. But then he ends it by saying, you guys have spent less time in school than Greta Thunberg, so just say thank you, thank your God, and then go away. Don't bother making political speeches because you guys don't have any room.
and go away. Yeah. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say.
You guys don't have any room because you guys were friends with Epstein. You guys are friends with Roman Polanski. You guys have no moral position.
Oh, okay. So, right after that, what was her name? Is it Michelle Williams?
I think it was, yeah.
It was basically a pro-abortion speech.
Yeah.
And that if it wasn't for abortion, she wouldn't have been able to continue her career. And I was like, that doesn't strike me as a good thing. How? If I didn't have the right to kill this baby, I may not have been the actress I am today.
Yeah, that's just...
So, that's right along with the messages that I know there's plenty of pro-choice people out there, but I mean, at some point you got to kind of think that is the entire purpose. You get pregnant, you kill somebody so you can proceed on with your life, and now you're patting yourself on the back and congratulating because she basically said, "Congratulations on me killing, aborting a baby."
The thing is that they don't see it as killing a human. That's how they justify it to themselves. But everybody else listening to that is like, he said, keep it to yourself. You don't have any moral high ground. You guys are just as, because he talked about, like, if ISIS had a streaming service, you guys would be calling your agent to get figure out how you can get on it. That's
your morality does not equate to everybody else.
Yeah. And then, and he's saying, just keep it to yourself. And then she's like, oh, I see how it is. I'm going to go completely the opposite direction. And be like, yeah, thanks for abortion. Otherwise, I couldn't have had a film career, because film career is so much more important than the life of a child. Oof.
Well, what's that Arquette lady's name that was on there with, like, the goofy glasses?
Patricia Arquette?
Is it Patricia? I don't know, one of the Arquettes. I know there's like two of them. But she was making a bunch of comments about Trump basically being a dictator and, and starting a war in the Middle East and all that stuff, because this was happening right around the same time. And then Jennifer Aniston got up and gave some, like, real fake speech. I think she was just reading off a teleprompter, something about Russell Crowe couldn't be here because he's fighting off the wildfires to protect his family from global warming. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that also happened in the last 2 weeks. Man, there's been a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's the Australian fires, although there's not much to say about that, so I didn't...
There were arsonists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were some people... What was it? 120 different people were arrested for, I guess, fires worse or starting fires, and I think half a dozen, maybe a dozen of them were activists that were purposely setting fires. The others were trying to do that land clear thing, get rid of the dry brush, but then it spread. Government put bans on starting out fires outside, but they didn't listen, so it was kind of accidental. But 120 people causing the fire or making it worse, and everyone's looking at it saying global warming. We just had this in California.
Yeah.
And because California didn't do its job to clean up what already happens naturally, is they have dry brush areas. It's a wildfire area. It's already known. Without human intervention, that stuff would be catching fire and, a blaze like every other year. Anytime there's a thunderstorm, or the rain hits, poof, it's in flames. So that's not global warming. That's been part of California since California.
Yeah, and the reason they get so bad is because we don't allow it to do what it naturally does. We go in and clear out stuff, and we only you can prevent forest fires and all that sorts of things. Like, small little fires every now and then prevent these large-scaled wildfires that are uncontrollable. Yeah. So it has been our poor management. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say our. It's been their poor management of the situation that leads to that. And a similar situation in Australia, although there were people deliberately setting fires to make it worse, because they're like, oh, global warming, let's prove this. That's the same thing as, like, the crazy environmentalists who go and blow up oil pipelines or go and, kill people because they're doing animal testing. It's like, well, would you rather have us doing human testing? Is that the solution? Hey, here we've got this cure for a disease. We don't know if it's going to work or not, so we'd rather test it in rats, but these crazy PETA people want to free the animals, so I guess the only solution is we need to test this on humans? All right. So here's the little bit thing on LBRY. So this is a new technology that Styx Hexenhammer and the Quartering have been talking about past couple of months or so, and I just started looking into this, and out of all the alternatives to YouTube, I think this is my favorite. I don't think it's perfect, but then again, nothing is, and so this is like 80% of what I had planned for my system for Funfair. There's a couple things about this that is different, so it is somewhat better for people who are using this. First of all, it's open source, so there is no company that you have to go through to start using the library protocol. That's good for users, but it does have some drawbacks. For me, that is something I had considered, although for what I wanted to do with my system, it did require a little bit of gatekeeping on the lines of going through a centralized system to get started. But once you were on the system, you were basically on your own internal network, and everything from there was pretty much basically its own protocol. Everything would be linked. It would all be in this distributed database. The difference between library and my system is library, there is no one entry point. You can have an infinite number of entry points to join their internal network. All you have to do is follow the same protocol. So, let's see. So this allows this library system. There's a lot of good things here that make it better than other alternatives, because there is no storage limit size. So things like mines, there is a limit size to how much you can upload. With this system, there isn't. So the other thing about this is it's all distributed database behind the system. But one of the big drawbacks to this particular is that it is using blockchain. Now, my system was not using blockchain. It was using a different system. It was still a distributed ledger, similar like blockchain is a distributed ledger. It was a similar distributed ledger, but blockchain it is intentionally slowed down. Now, their solution to that was to increase the block size, and something I had not heard about, but this is pretty ingenious, and it's something that isn't being utilized with blockchain at the moment. It's something that I think they called it like lightning something. I forget where it actually references that. Yeah, so it is nice that you can use library for free. I'm seeing that, but it does use blockchain, which makes it basically a secure peer-to-peer network, which is nice, but blockchain is deliberately slow. So their solution, I think it's called Lightning. Let me go back to the FAQ and find something on that, because I know that there was a... Yeah, they changed this a little while ago, because there wasn't this many links before when I first started looking at this. It seems like they broke it down into individual sections, where before it was like maybe 2 or 3 pages, and now it's got all these little side tangents. Huh. How is a library different from a toaster? What?
So, I guess
there's a couple of things. Yeah, so this is way different from when I started looking at this a couple of weeks ago.
Well, because there's a section about naming conventions, and the names are not bot only reserved, but you have to use these library credits, which you have to purchase ahead of time, and then use a library credit to reserve it's basically a library URL to generate a URL to your piece of content, and then that credit sits there until you no longer want to have that content available. Then you can take the credits back. So technically, yeah, you don't lose it, but if you're trying to build your own library, like not program library, but your own content database, So you've got your channel with, 500 videos, you're going to have 500 URLs reserved. Unless there's an app that can host that for free and not, I guess, for the short URLs. And anytime someone maybe keeps a catalog of a channel, you click on the video, it'll go register a short URL and allow you to get the content. So not quite sure yet.
Yeah, so there's a lot more information than when I first started looking at this, and hopefully I'll look more into this later on, and maybe we'll discuss this in previous or in future weeks. But this seems like a very, very good system. It doesn't solve everything. You still have the problem of, because it's built on blockchain, the currency has no inherent value. So that means you could have like 1 million library coins or LBCs, and that could only mean like, oh, you have like $1. You could trade that on an exchange for $1. Yay. There are they used to have a link where it was talking about how you can exchange, but I don't see it here.
Yeah, and I would be interested in how everything is stored. Is that going to be like torrenting with Pirate Bay? That keeps a catalog of everything available through LBRY, or how would your app go out there if it's distributed?
So this is something like I don't see it on here because like I said, this is different from when I was originally looking into this. But basically, there is no limit. So you can have all this content is out there, and regardless of the content that's out there, each one is going to have a unique address.
Yep.
So you're going to have an address. So like say you upload a video, like say I upload this stream to the LBRY network, it's going to have a unique identifier, and nobody else who uses the LBRY protocol can have an address that matches mine. That is my unique address. Nobody else can duplicate it. And that's what the network is keeping track of, to making sure there's no duplicate addresses.
Yeah.
So, in order to figure out what bit of content, so that the address also includes metadata, which is going to be like the title of your video or a little description of the video and the thumbnails and things like that. So that's all stored in that address. So what they talked about is different search sites. You can have as many different search lists. Like for right now, for BitChute, you have to go to BitChute to search for videos in BitChute and find your whatever you're looking for. And you have to go through BitChute in order to get that content. You can't get through it any other way. But what this system allows for is you could have, say, LBRY search #1, and then you could have something else that is searchlibry.com. And they may display different content, but either way, they're both looking for this network, and they're basically listing out all these addresses and displaying the content that's there. So you're going to have multiple browsers, or multiple sites searching for LBRY content. There's no limit to the number of websites that can create a list that basically displays and accesses these LBRY addresses. So, because everybody's going to have that distributed ledger that has all the addresses on them and has all the metadata. So anybody that wants to can create a site and display that information. So so what it talked about is you could actually have, so since you registered that LBRY address, even if a search site says, hey, here's this content, in order for somebody to access that address and that content, you could lock that down and be like, okay, in order to access this, you have to give me so many coins. You have to pay for it to access it for this amount of time. You can set that policy because you are the owner of the address.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the site that pulls it up isn't in control of that. Whoever owns the address is in control of that. So that is a nice feature that you can say, oh, well, hey, just anybody who wants to access my content, just pay me $1. Or whatever it is in library coin. You know, oh, just give me 1 coin and you get access to this. Or you could set it up as... There's multiple different things you can do with that. Now, this is new. So I do know it's decentralized, but I don't know what SIA or storage is. Storage? I guess that's how you pronounce that. Yeah, there's a lot more information on this now than when I first started looking into this. The one of the main things I wanted to talk about is you can actually make money by giving them storage space. And that is something that I was planning on doing with my system, but that would that would require my system being able to actually launch, but so this is something so that you can mine for their coins, although I don't understand quite what the purpose of that is. And that's one of the most confusing thing when I first started looking at that. It's like, yeah, so you're using a blockchain, so there should be some mining mechanism, but I don't know why you would want to. That's... because it doesn't seem like there's... I mean, I guess there is... You can get these library coins, and then they're hopefully eventually going to have value. I don't know what their value is right now. I haven't checked on anything like that. But what I saw is that you can get rewarded for giving storage space, saying, hey, here's here's 10 gigs of my hard drive for you to use as part of your cloud storage. That is something that is way different from like BitChute or Minds and what they're offering.
Okay, so you can purchase storage that have direct or faster access. But other than that, it sounds like it's a torrented network. So the more people that have watched your content, the easier it would be to distribute.
No. I don't think it has anything to do with how many people have watched it.
But where would it be seeding from? Like, so if
that's gonna be those wherever you go to search for content. That's where it's gonna be seeded from. If you go to so there is a library search site that's already built, but I imagine there's gonna be more than one because there's no limit to how many of these can search through and be used to access this. Yeah.
I'll just have to do some more research.
Yeah, so there's a lot more information on here than when I first started looking into this, and I guess I probably should have looked at this before deciding. It's just because I planned to talk about this when we did our last stream, and we never got around to it. And so I was like, oh, well, we'll just say what was on there, because one of the things... So basically, I just wanted to talk about this being open source. It is a protocol as opposed to a particular site or company, which makes it vastly different from anything else that's out there. Like I said, BitChute, I do like BitChute, but you do have to go through BitChute. So if they ever change their terms of service, you're SOL. Minds, same thing. Even though I like Minds, I think it's a very good platform. If they ever go the route of Tor, or not Tor, what was that called? No, what was the other one that was Gab? If they ever go the route of Gab, then you're SOL. Because it seemed, at least to me, that Gab started off as open source, anything goes, and then as it went on, they're like, oh, nope, now it's getting more, well, no, you can't have that on our, we don't want that type of content here, we don't want you, and it's, because they're talking specifically about pornography, which, I mean, granted, I've got a problem with, I don't like that pornography exists on the internet. I think pornography is detrimental to everybody who watches it and participates in it and all that sort of thing. But the fact is, it is something that should be allowed on a site that is, hey, we're dedicated to allowing people to create content and then allowing people to access content. It's like, well, because pornography is legal to create, if you have a site that allows content, that should be on there if you are dedicated to free transactions. So, to me, that seems like they made promises to people, and then as the site got bigger and as it got more, funding and it got more people involved, then they started putting in, they started putting blocks to things that would previously be allowable but are not now. And as far as I know, there's nothing stopping BitChute from doing that. There's nothing stopping Minds from doing that. But LBRY, they're like, hey, it's a protocol. They can't change it. You get to do... If you want to upload a specific type of content, they can't stop you. If you... And as long as you've got people who want to access that particular content, well, this is a protocol, and you guys can make that exchange all you want. So that is a very nice thing about this particular system. The other thing is you can get paid for offering up your hardware and storage. I guess that's similar to mining, whereas mining you're basically getting rewarded for offering the network your processing power. This is just kind of like one step above that. It's like, okay, in addition to that, you can also give them, access to your storage as well. You're like, hey, I want to store X amount of content on my computer, and then when people are searching the network, and rather than storing it on their individual devices, they can come and get it from mine. Yeah. So let's see. Okay. The discovery, access, and optional purchase of digital content. So, okay, here's one of the big drawbacks that I saw is LBRY only works for digital content. That's where I think my system was superior, because my system allowed for other types of content as well. Because my system allowed for purchases in general. Didn't matter what you were purchasing. You could be purchasing digital content, or you could be purchasing, actual goods and services. This only works for digital content.
And I mean, still, that's most of the traffic on the internet.
Yeah.
Streaming movies, YouTube, music.
Yeah.
So I think that covers quite a bit. At least just having a digital distribution method that's open.
Yeah, so I'm looking at here right now. So yes, so the discovery is part of the protocol, and that's where you're talking about how do you the seed.
Yeah.
So as far as with torrents, that's like the more people who have it and make it available, the easier it is to access. Whereas this seems to be different. It's like, yeah, it's possible that it's stored in only one place. Doesn't matter. You can still find it and you can still access it very easily with this system. Yeah, I'll have to do more looking into this because, like I said, they've changed this whole since I started looking at it, and there's a lot more information. But it is very interesting and very cool. Yeah, although I'm not sure. Yeah, so the only thing I'm not sure is if there's a way to buy LBRY coins, because it does say about your credit card information. Because that would be one thing that changes, or that does significantly improve this system, is if you can buy coins directly from them and then use those coins to purchase content or or get and I'm not quite sure if you need coins to publish content, because that's one of the things that wasn't quite clear when I was originally reading through this. But
well, it kind of sounded like it on the naming section.
Yeah, this is a very well. That's the other thing is they talked about you have to purchase an address or the naming thing, but it sounded like somebody else might be able to buy it out from you without your like. And if you're saying I want this name for my content, and somebody else says no, I'm willing to pay more for that. It sounded almost like you would auction that back and forth, and that's something that sounded a little bit odd to me, and it wasn't quite clear from the original way that this was all described. But either way, this is a really cool bit of technology. Oh, and while I've got this pulled up, I'm just going to play the little intro for it, because I don't think I've played that. So, because this shows the existing search engine. So that's the current browsing site that you can go through from LBRY, where you can go and search for content. And I do kind of like that they got some creators in the videos here that kind of get frowned on other communities. I'm just being me. So they got Stefan Monalou, they got Peter Schiff. There's a couple other guys in here. There's a what's his name? Grade A under A, and then Casually Explained. So yeah, very cool bit of technology, and it's something I'm planning on using in the future. I'm not doing anything with it right now, but that's something I'll be researching more and figuring out how to become a part of that. Because I would like to start uploading to that, and I would like to start also, offering, because I've got my PC that's sitting here, on most of the day, and I've got like 400 gigs of data or storage space that I haven't even touched. I'm like, well, if I can offer to sell that storage space, basically partition a section of my hard drive and be like, hey, this is all for LBRY storage, and pay me for the use of it. That would be nice.
Yeah, let's see how that works.
Yeah, so this is something that's definitely worth looking into, and out of all of the proposed YouTube's alternatives, this, to me, seems to have the most potential. Like I said, it doesn't solve every problem, but it does solve a lot of them, like 80 to 90% of the stuff. But one of the main problems I see is, like, while there is a way to monetize your content and all that sort of thing, if you don't have people actively purchasing your content, there doesn't seem to be a way to make money. Like right now with YouTube, you can have a successful channel but not have any of your viewers purchasing anything or giving you direct monetary compensation, because it's, you can basically make money off of YouTube's AdSense. This doesn't have a way to do that. So there are a lot of channels on YouTube right now that depend entirely on that AdSense, because a lot of their audience is younger children who don't have credit cards and don't have any money and aren't spending, they're just watching videos, but they're watching millions of them.
What this could provide is for channels like that, if you had in a similar AdSense company,
yeah,
you sell ads and then you provide links and say, hey, you sign up with our company, we'll put an ad before your video and give you some monetization. And this would allow companies to specify what type of content that they were fine with ads being hosted on. So allow you to have kind of free content out there. Well, free, while still giving a place to advertisers to use something like that. So I could see that as being an option.
Yeah, it's not their So with YouTube, it's built into the system. With LBRY, it's not. So it's something people would have to add on after the fact. It is. Yeah. That can happen. It's just not there right now.
Well, YouTube, it's mandatory. Everything's got ads.
Yeah.
You got a blocker or something.
Yeah. Even if your video isn't monetized, they could still run an ad, and then you just don't get any money from it.
Yep.
So this doesn't have any way along those lines for people to make money that way. But
well, again, that's what I'm saying, out of box. But since it's open source, you could build an app that provides ads before linking direct to your content, and then you subscribe to this company that built the app, and then they get you in touch with advertisers that you can hopefully work with or try and put your videos out. So you can still run something that way, or you can kind of do the whole Patreon thing, start a channel and say, hey, if you'd like to see more content, donate $1 or $2 to Patreon.
Not Patreon, Subscribestar. Patreon.
Subscribestar.
Yeah, but this seems to be the best initiative, and I hope this starts to pick up more. I was trying to see how long this has been out. It hasn't been out that long. So I was about to say, this is really new. I think this has only been out for like maybe 6 months.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it'll probably take a little while to start picking up everywhere.
Yeah. So this is a fairly new technology, all things considered. I was trying to see. Maybe there's something in the terms of service, but yep. Yeah, this is definitely something I'm gonna have to look more into and talk about more. Not because, like I said, there's a lot more information available about this now. So it's something I'm gonna have to do a lot of reading on my weekends and try to figure that out. But let's see, what else was there to talk about? Was there? Let's see, LBRY, Gervais, and Soleimani. The other thing was the impeachment thing that has actually gone through. It wasn't in my show notes, but so the House, after passing the vote to impeach, has finally passed that on to the Senate, and now it is being held up in the Senate, and they're having this big discussion on whether they should allow additional witnesses and evidence, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I'm not sure.
Wait.
Do you know who LBRY is? Have you seen any of his stuff?
I subscribe to him, actually.
Yeah, he's
got a lot of good commentary.
Yeah, good commentary, knows his stuff, and actually does research. And I was like, yeah, as soon as I saw him breaking down this stuff.
Another guy, Legal Eagle, and then that kind of put me on to his videos, because I noticed the Legal Eagle's guy's a little
biased
on his commentary. He's not doing so much middle of the line like the rest of his content.
Yeah.
So
he's definitely got a bias when it comes to this. But yeah, the LBRY has been doing excellent analysis of this. But yeah, when he's talked about this, he's like, yeah, there's a lot of people posting. It's like, oh, they're not allowing witnesses and evidence, and I'm like, no, you gotta state this correctly. They're not allowing additional witnesses and evidence, because if the evidence and witness testimony so far is what was used to vote in the House for impeachment, that should be all that was required for the actual impeachment trial.
Yep. They were confident enough to impeach the president and have 2 charges, then that means they should have been confident enough in the information provided that the Senate would be able to come up to the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the way they operated at all. Basically, I think they did this on purpose to try and control the Senate.
Yeah, that was the whole reason Nancy Pelosi was holding it back and not delivering to the Senate. It's like, oh, you want to make sure that you guys, obey our rules, and you're going to give us you're going to basically do this the way we want you to do it.
But that's not the way Congress is supposed to operate. Those are 2 separate chambers. House cannot tell the Senate what to do. Senate doesn't tell the House what to do.
Yeah.
They each have their own separate stuff. The House is supposed to collect information and see is there enough information to impeach the president? Do we have a reason to proceed with an impeachment? That's their job.
Yeah.
After that, they pass it on to the Senate, and then the Senate is the one that does the trial and see, is this valid?
Yeah.
So allows for a two-check chamber system before kicking the president out, but it does mean the House needs to do their due diligence.
Yeah.
Why they would rush through so much if they're so worried about not having enough information for impeachment?
So from my understanding is everything that was discovered in the House that led up to impeachment cannot be ignored by the Senate. Like, they have to take that all into account, like when they're doing their trial. But there's no obligation for them to do anything else on top of that.
Correct.
Granted, it's not exactly the same way, or the same as an act, as what's set up as a regular court case would be. Whereas a regular court case, basically the detectives or the police officers that are investigating, they gather up all the evidence, they submit it to the DA, and the DA decides whether, is this something that we can prosecute or not. So the DA gathers all the evidence and like, yeah, this is worth prosecuting. They'll take that and they'll present it to the judge. It's presented to both the defense, as well. Sorry, this is mostly criminal processing because I'm talking about the DA, this is not civil, but so what happens at the House is very similar to what happens with the police gathering the information and the DA presenting a case to try.
Yeah, stating we've got enough to build a case to take it to trial.
So that's basically what happened with the House. So they gathered the evidence, DA looked at the evidence, was like, yeah, we have enough to go to trial. It was basically, when they voted in the House that, yes, we have enough here to go forward with impeachment. At that point, all the evidence is collected. There's no additional evidence. There's no additional research. At that point, when that decision is made, that's when the trial happens, and everything that happens during the trial is just based on the initial information that's collected. Now, they could petition the judge to be like, oh, we're waiting on additional information that could change things, or we just discovered information. Like, this is something that happens all the time in TV shows and movies, where there's some critical bit of evidence that they didn't know about beforehand. And this is, like, I like My Cousin Vinny as a film, but that would be the game changer scene of the film or whatever. That's not how it works in court. In court, both sides.
If it's evidence that you should have already been able to gather, you just simply didn't, then it's not allowed. It's excused. However, if, say, you're being tried for murder, and then all of a sudden they find the body and uncover it, that's massive evidence that people did not know was there to begin with. So that would be a case where it would be allowed, or a new uncovered thing popped up that completely changes the trial and it's not related to any previous evidence. So it's not like, well, we had this evidence and we already asked these people, but we got more evidence from a witness that was already brought up and we'd like to submit this new evidence. So you can't do that.
Yeah. And so LBRY was talking about that, and I was like, but what he didn't quite bring up is that creates grounds for appeals and for mistrials. Because if you're bringing up evidence that the defense didn't know about and you're trying to surprise and spring, it's like, oh, hey, we had this secret evidence. And like, if it's introduced in the middle of the trial, usually that's going to mean, oh, that means this is going to be appealed because that's new evidence. The defense didn't have any way of counteracting. It's something that was presented at the trial for the first time. So there was no way to respond. There was no way to prove or validate. That's something the defense has got to be like, okay, this basically just changed my entire strategy or my entire okay, I had this. So sometimes when it comes to like murder trial, right, they're trying to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. And if you're building a narrative and a story of what could account for the evidence, that means that your client could be innocent, right? You're saying, well, they're presenting one case. They're saying that my client did all these things, and there's all this evidence pointing to them. And it's like, well, some of this evidence isn't pointing at him. Maybe it's pointing to another suspect that we don't know about yet. That's all you have to do is sow that seed of doubt. But if they present some kind of new information that you're like, well, I didn't know about this before the trial started, it presented halfway through, now the the narrative I was building of a potential other suspect, well, now that's blown out the water. That was my entire defense. Now I've got to come up with a new defense. But meanwhile, the jury has already heard my initial story, like my initial defense. So I've got nothing. That means more than likely the jury's going to decide in favor of the prosecution. And then you're like, okay, well, we're just going to have to appeal because now we've got to have another trial where now I can account for this new piece of evidence. And when I'm talking to the jury, the next set of jury, I can be like, okay, my original strategy isn't going to work because that bit of evidence makes that alternative possible narrative unlikely. So now I've got to come up with a new possible narrative that means like, okay, there could be somebody other than my client that committed the murder, and that's all I have to do in order to make, in order to get a verdict of not guilty.
I would also say that even if there's not a jury, but you're presenting this to a judge, if it's brand new evidence, the judge hasn't had time, because most cases like that, the judge will preview all the evidence before the case actually starts to make sure they're aware of what's going to be presented. They're just looking at each narrative to dictate, is this a valid piece of evidence or does it make sense within this context?
Yeah.
But if you shock the jury or the judge with a piece of evidence that does sound somewhat damning, the other side can't rebut because they don't even know what you just presented. They had no idea it was there. So now it's in the judge's mind or it's in the jury's mind. Yep, that's evidence that can't be refuted because the other side didn't. But had they known it was there, that would build them an opportunity or give them an opportunity to kind of lessen the blow or actually explain what that evidence is.
Yeah.
Does it actually fit in the case? We don't know because it wasn't cross-examined. It's not, it wasn't made available to both sides. So,
so in our system,
fair as we can.
Yeah, we're trying to make it as fair as we can, but it's also, it's like, yeah, this eliminates the needs for appeals and the needs for, like everybody had the same information to start with. They're making their cases based on that evidence. And that is the most fair and the most likely to lead to the accurate conclusion. But if you're with this springing up information or new things that weren't expected beforehand, granted, it works great for movies and television. In real court, that'd be like, okay, yeah, we're just gonna have to go to the next appeal because that was BS. That was an unfair fight that we had no way to retaliate during this, and basically all that's going to do is waste the court's time, waste the people's time, because they're like, okay, the way that this was run, we are going to have to appeal, and that way we can present a new evidence now that both sides have all the same information.
Yep.
Yeah, in order to cut down on all of that, it helps to have both people starting, or everybody who's involved, the judge, the jury, all starting off on the same page. And that's why for the Senate right now, it makes sense to be like, okay, you have enough information that you felt confident to vote to impeach. That's all the information we should need to run the trial. If you're trying to add, Democrats right now are wanting additional information and additional, it's like, that's gonna.
Said you had enough. So what is it that you're expecting?
So here's the main, one of the big problems with this is the Senate doesn't have the same appeals process. If the Senate votes on this impeachment, and if there was additional information that came up only because of the trial and wasn't there beforehand, and that leads to a vote to impeach the president, there is no appeal. The president can't be like, okay, I need to go to a higher court. It's like, no, that's it. That's what the Democrats are kind of hoping for, is to, like, oh, some new shock witness or some new shock evidence during the trial. What they're hoping
for. The way listening to like Schiff talk, I think what he's trying to do is state that we as the House did our due diligence, even though they didn't. I mean, how many of their subpoenas did they say went unanswered, and yet they had the legal right to take that to a court
and
to validate the subpoena and force those people to come in and test, and they didn't. Skipped it.
Yeah, they didn't. They skipped that, and then they're using that as evidence against Trump. They're like, oh, see, these witnesses weren't allowed to testify. And I'm like, well, you didn't force them to.
I think what they're trying to do, and especially Schiff, and I think Pelosi's roped in, not quite sure if she's got anything dirty, and that's why she all of a sudden, jumped ship on the whole, we need to be careful with impeachment. I don't know what's quite going on with her, but at least on Adam Schiff's side, I think they anticipated that they're not going to really find much because the whole premise they built this off of is pretty shaky. It's extremely questionable if this could ever be considered impeachable, or it's just bad policy or bad practice, which, you know, president making a decision you don't like is not impeachable.
Oh, and there was a video I was watching today with Tim Pool where he was talking about a bit of information that just recently came out that's kind of exonerating, or at least from what I can... For me, this sounds like a complete exoneration of Trump. Because it was information, it was an audio tape that was released, where Trump is talking about firing, was it Yelenic? No, not Yelenic. Yanovich, yeah. So somebody comes up to him, I forget the name of the guy, comes up to him and talks about how the reason Trump isn't able to get his agenda, done in Ukraine is because this Yovanovitch ambassador is undermining him. She's going to people and saying, don't worry about that, Trump's going to get impeached. And Trump's like, yeah, then get rid of her. And this is an entire year before Biden announced he was running. So the Democratic narrative is that Trump was digging up dirt on Biden, in order to use against him in a presidential run. And this Yanovich person, he fired her because she was going to stop that. And it's like,
I'm gonna have to look up the guy's name.
That's a full year before Biden was even in the running. Other people have already made their announcements that they're gonna run. There's other people that Trump would already be potentially going against that he knows about. But supposedly he's defending himself by firing her in anticipation of collecting evidence against Biden on the off chance that Biden a year from now decides to run for president. That to me that undermines their entire case, because it's the time frame is so far back where Trump is like, yeah, we need to get this investigated because this looks like corruption, and she's undermining me, she's not letting this go through, she's bad mouthing me and saying I'm going to be impeached, and so don't do your jobs, get rid of her. That, to me, points to that this has no motivation involved with the presidential run of 2020. Has nothing to do with that. Because this is a full year before Biden. And it shows to me, it's like, okay, here's a pattern of Trump being like, no, we need to get this corruption investigated. We need to get this sorted out.
Yeah, okay, so that's the part that's a little iffy on this. So the guy who he was talking to was named Lev Parnas.
Yeah, Parnas. That's the name.
So he's like, what is he, Ukrainian-American business executive that was apparently at this dinner, and he was the one that was bringing up the information.
Yeah.
So Trump was already asked about this, and he denied it, even knowing who Lev Parnas was. So that's how they're trying to spin it, as in he's denying something that we have a definitive audio recording with Parnas' voice and Trump immediately after saying get rid of her, meaning they've obviously met, they had dinner. So
yeah,
they're trying to spin
he's just like
covering something up because he's lying. Where Trump has a tendency to just spit something out, and if it's incorrect, he'll back it up because he's never wrong.
Yeah. So to me, that's I don't know who this Parnas guy
from 2018, and he's like, I don't know who that is, and then they bring up a recording, and he's like, I already said I don't know who that is, because he's Trump.
Yeah.
So sometimes he's kind of shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I hadn't heard that bit of it, but I don't. You said he's like just some businessman, right? He's not somebody who's involved. He's not a political, right? I mean, he's not a member of a political cabinet or anything along those lines. So maybe this was just some guy who was at that particular dinner, and Trump didn't know.
Yeah, but he does have ties to business proceedings in Ukraine, which I don't know if Parnas had anything to do with Burisma.
Yeah, but that should be, that's kind of like irrelevant. Maybe this was the only time Trump and that guy had ever met. Who knows?
Could be.
Is that like, oh, he's like, oh yeah.
Oh, that's what Lev Parnas was saying. Trump instructed him to go dig up dirt or something. So he's kind of saying something opposite of what the president is saying, and the Democrats are taking Lev Parnas' side. So Trump is that's what it was. Lev Parnas was making a claim that he was instructed by the president to go see if he can dig up some information in Ukraine, and so Trump was like, I don't even know who this guy is. And then the audio recording popped up to say, yeah, you do. You had a dinner. But in the audio recording, it shows that Parnas was feeding him information stating, hey, she's undermining you over in Ukraine, which the ambassador should not be doing that against the president.
Yeah. And he's just like, yeah, we need to get rid of her.
So Trump has every right to say, get rid of her. You're an ambassador. I'm the president. You represent me in this country. You don't go around telling other countries the president's getting impeached. That's not your job. That's not what you're there for.
Yeah.
So if that's true, I mean, I don't know if any of that is true or Parnas made it up. I hadn't found out the validity of that statement. But if that's the information being fed to Trump, it would make sense why he wants to fire Yovanovitch.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the confusion, is Parnas was stating Trump ordered him to go dig up some information. And Trump's like, I don't even know who this guy is.
And I would say, based on the recording, it's not clear whether they've got an ongoing relationship or whether this was a one-time meeting and he's just like, oh yeah, by the way, this ambassador your ambassador in Ukraine, she's been telling everybody to ignore your instructions because you're going to get impeached. So, and then Trump's is like, oh, well, that's what's going on. We need to get rid of her. That's all we know right now.
He was telling his aide that was standing there to get rid of her, not this Parnas guy.
Yeah. So as far as the Parnas guy, he might not have known exactly who Parnas was, but he was just like, oh, is that what's going on? Okay, that makes sense. That may be why I'm not able to get my agenda passed there. All right, and then he talks to his aide and he's like, yeah, we need to get rid of her. She's apparently the reason. And now it makes sense. And then maybe he never got Parnas' name. But according to Parnas, apparently it was an ongoing thing. But
we don't know. I mean, that's the only definitive time that they've got of them meeting, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
Was that dinner? So
he should be able to produce evidence as far as, like, communication, like if they were communicating over email or over the phone, or logs of him going into the Oval Office or meeting at other place other than this dinner.
Obviously, yeah. If he's not part of the cabinet, he's not having private meetings with the president. Someone's there.
Yeah.
In fact, they had the whole dinner where they were discussing that, and there's other people present.
Yeah. So he should be, if he's saying this is an ongoing thing where he was asked to investigate on, he should have proof other than just this audio recording. Because the audio recording by itself only shows what we do know, that, yeah, he was there at that meeting and he did talk to the president, but there's no...
The president had a legitimate reason, not a cover-up, legitimate reason for firing her.
Based on that, there is no indication that they had an ongoing relationship prior to that. It's probably just like he's at a dinner meeting, guy presents information to him, he's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, all right, I'm going to operate based on that new information. Doesn't matter who the person is giving the information, as long as it's kind of like, oh, okay, that's the piece that clicks.
Mm-hmm.
But so if this guy is legitimate and he's like, yeah, this is something that Trump did, and it's something that would be kind of incriminating on Trump's part, this guy should be able to provide more than just his testimony to back up what he's saying.
Yep. But yeah, I think that is kind of one of the things that has dragged us out so long. I was listening to, wasn't just Shapiro, I think Michael Knowles brought it up, and then there was some other channel outside of Daily Wire I was watching. But basically, Trump does have the tendency, like,
yeah,
he was sticking with that whole, it was a perfect phone call. Mm-hmm. It was perfect. They just trying to, they just been trying to impeach me for 3 years. Nothing wrong with it. No quid pro quo. Nothing. It was perfect. So within the phone call, there is no explicit quid pro quo.
Yeah, it's all implied.
But at the time of the phone call, it could have been implied because funds were being withheld. But there is nothing actually wrong with quid pro quo because that's kind of how business is done. Yeah. That's a norm. So rather than stick to his guns and say no quid pro quo and it was a perfect phone call, he could say, yeah, I did withhold the funds temporarily. They just got a new president elected, and I wanted to make sure this is somebody that we should be doing business with. And, we've been having reports of corruption for years. We have a new administration.
Yeah.
Let's weed it out first before handing taxpayer money over.
And there are members of Congress who have, who like Republican members of Congress who are like, yeah, that's kind of what we said to do. Yeah.
Supposed to be doing it. The only reason it looks suspicious is because he made a claim that there was no quid pro quo because people brought up, well, it's quid pro quo. And he's like, nope, no quid pro quo. And even if there was, that's not impeachable. That's him doing
his job. Shouldn't be impeachable. But that's one of the things that is painfully clear is that anything is impeachable. If the House doesn't like the way the president farts, they can impeach him for that. It's a stupid. There is no rules written in the Constitution that requires them. They can impeach him for anything. It's like, oh, can you believe he mocked Greta Thunberg? All right, that's impeachable. They could vote to impeach based on that. Now, whether they can get the Senate to approve and be like, okay, we need to kick him out of office because of that, that's what they're trying to get through right now. But what they've done so far, it looks by all perspectives that this is going to get to the Senate, and the Senate's going to have their vote, and they'll be like, yeah, no, he stays.
Well, especially with the two things they're charging him with, are not impeachable. Obstruction of Congress.
Yeah.
There has been nothing like that. Yeah. Part of his cabinet was told, hold on, wait a few days, had to go get themselves lawyered up so that way they aren't being charged with perjury and wrong information or saying this one time and then being asked again, and now their statements have changed. They got to have a chance to prepare themselves to go testify in front of the House. Fine. But if they had subpoenas, they have the power to go get those subpoenas pushed through a court, validate the subpoenas, and then force people to show up.
Yeah.
They have all that power. They could have done all of that. They should have done that if this was a proper proceeding. So right now, I think that's the way it's going to happen. But what it looks like Adam Schiff is trying to do is make it look like they did their job, that the president was resisting and struggling because he's trying to cover something up. So now he's trying to put the weight on Republicans, since there's a Republican majority in the Senate, to state, well, if you're not allowing evidence, then you're also part of the cover-up. Basically, a blanket, smack Republicans down across the board, so that way Democrats have total control on next election. It's all this. It's a giant smear campaign against Republicans.
And more than likely, it's not going to work, and it's going to have the reverse effect. That's what I see out of this, because most people who are looking at this, they can see through it, and so it seems like they're playing two different games. Now, Republicans are looking at this situation, and they're saying, well, if we're going to remove the president from office, that for us, that's going to require something that is clear and convincing. And right now, you've provided nothing but circumstantial evidence, and taking a lot of things for granted. It's like, yes, you've gathered all this stuff that may look suspect on surface, but it's all kind of circumstantial, and there are other alternative explanations for it that don't require any kind of nefarious activity. Yeah, it's all speculation.
There's what was going through the president's mind.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of speculation that is required on that. And for Republicans, they're like, that's not clear and convincing. So that, I think I've brought this up in previous streams, where it's like, so there's the preponderance of evidence, which is usually good enough for a civil case. Usually if you're like, when a judge is making a ruling on which neighbor to support in a dispute between property lines or something like that, they're looking for something along the lines of a preponderance of evidence. The next level that I couldn't remember last time I talked about this is clear and convincing. Now, usually when it comes to a criminal case, clear and convincing is what's required. That's what the judge is looking for. That's what the jury is looking for. Clear and convincing. Not circumstantial, not a preponderance of circumstantial, not a preponderance of evidence. They're looking for clear and convincing. Yes, this person did it. They should go to jail. Because it's like, well, you have all this kind of circumstantial evidence, but it requires a whole lot of speculation, or it requires us to take a lot of things for granted. We can't put somebody in jail for 10 years over that.
Yeah, we can't say, well, maybe or probably. So
it's like, well, this guy's probably guilty, So we put him in jail for 10 years only to find out, oh, it was some other guy who did the crime. Crap. That's why it requires that next level. And when you're talking about kicking somebody out of the White House who was voted in, you know, using our regular legal system or the regular voting process by the American people, for everybody looking at this without Trump derangement syndrome, they're like, we need clear and convincing. If you can provide clear and convincing evidence that, yeah, he did something that he shouldn't have done, yeah, okay, that would be grounds to kicking him out. And that's what it seems like everybody who's talking about this, they're on the grounds of clear and convincing. It's not as far as beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just like, yeah, okay, there's definitely something that went wrong here. But right now, all the Republicans are like, we don't see that. And all the commentators are like, yeah, we don't see that. We see a preponderance of evidence, but it's not clear and convincing. So for us, it's not far enough. And the Democrats are like, oh, all we need is a preponderance of evidence. All we need is all this evidence that's like, well, it looks like he possibly could have done something wrong. And as long as you think he did something wrong, this is enough. But as long as you don't think he did anything wrong, it's not enough. And for some reason, the Democrats can't grasp that, or at least they're not willing to grasp that. Because for them, he was a bad guy on day one. He was a bad guy as soon as he launched his campaign. He was the worst of the worst. He went from being a celebrity on national TV with a hit show who everybody loved and was everybody's friend, and then he announced the run for president and became Hitler 2.0.
Yeah.
And then everything he does after that point is malicious and nefarious and absolute evil and is trying to get everybody killed. And as long as they've got that in their mind, any little bit of evidence, they're stringing all these pieces of evidence together, be like, oh, like that's confirmation bias. That's proof that he's bad. That's proof that he's bad. But for people on the other side who are like, we don't see anything wrong, all of that just seems like conspiracy theory. I mean, well,
I'd say additionally, it's pointing out, just bad politics, a lot of mudslinging, extreme partisanship. Like Maxine Waters has been screaming impeach 45 since the day he won the election, before he even got inaugurated.
And Rashida Tlaib got elected, and on the night she's announced, yeah, we won. We're going to impeach the MFer.
Yeah. And then if you look at Adam Schiff and the way he has operated everything, and Jerry Nadler with this whole impeachment, Nadler is like 180 degrees opposite of what he used to say. Pelosi is kind of within just the last few months on her stance on that. So I think she must have lost some kind of sway in the House and is just worried if I don't follow along, I lose I lose the seat. I'm no longer the speaker.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, he's just, I don't know what's up with that guy. That guy is dirty, just dirty tactics and a flat out liar.
Yeah, so he seems like he's really, really dumb, but then as other people brought up, he's Harvard educated and
he's a lawyer, yeah.
Yeah, he's a lawyer. So I was like, he can't be that stupid, but he presents himself as like, how can you be this dumb? How can you present what sounds or what you can represent as you reading the transcript only to have the transcript be nothing like what you said? Like, that was just a joke. How can you...
It's not the time for joking. You're trying to impeach the president.
Especially when it's like your opening statement, you decided to make it an entire joke about what...
so that Viva La Fry or whatever. Viva Fry. He had a video on that specifically talking about Schiff's opening statements to the Senate.
Yeah.
And
where he's just repeating
practice
things.
that he's using, where he's leading you to believe, this and this, and repeating stuff that it's not actually proven. It's just repeated enough, you begin to think that that's already in the case and it's known.
Yeah. Very, very deceptive tactics that he was using there. The other thing he said, Fry pointed this out when he said that the president is capable of this. It's like, no one can deny that the president is capable of this. It's like,
the president's capable. It's like, you're capable of that.
Anybody who has a mouth is capable of that. That's what Fry said. I was like, yeah, that's capable. I was like, yes. That, like, imagine if that was at a criminal trial. Like, well, can you imagine that this person was capable of this? It's like,
yeah,
this person has, well, see what was done.
5'10", he seems decently in shape. I'm pretty sure he's capable of squeezing the trigger on the gun while he's aiming at someone. He definitely looks capable.
Yeah. If you put a gun in his hand, he could pull the trigger. All right. Guilty. 10 years in prison. Well, yeah. But did you prove that his fingerprints were on the gun? No. But he seems capable of it. Oh, man, this. I hope that sort of stuff doesn't go on in actual criminal cases where lawyers make similar statements to what Schiff did, because if a jury or a judge is convinced by that, man, that is a low state for our justice and our system. Is like, I understand it's a tactic, but I want to know how effective that tactic is, because I saw the speech and I was like, dude, this is all BS. This proves that you have no actual evidence and you're relying entirely on an emotional and deceptive argument. For me, that was like, yeah, that just shows what kind of a D-bag Schiff is. But there's probably people who listen to that and didn't catch on to it and are like, oh, this is convincing. Oh, there was another thing that was on Twitter where some guy was talking about it was like I think it was like a press secretary or something like that for Clinton, and he tweeted out, like, he overheard a conversation between two Republicans saying if even half of what Schiff is saying is possibly true, then this was something like we're in the shit or something like that. And then later on he retweeted, oh, well, that's not an actual conversation that I overheard, but you could imagine. But
so he's imagining Republicans.
No, I mean, he didn't say. I don't know if that's the exact words, but as I said it, I was kind of like that scene from Billy Madison. Well, I didn't, but you can imagine.
Yeah, well, you didn't. Well, no.
No, I had a friend, but no, you didn't. Well, you can imagine. That's essentially what his tweet boiled down to. Is like, wait. The other thing is, like, if half of what he said is true, it's like, yeah, if half of what Trump is accused of is legitimate, then yeah, that's bad. That he's definitely, if it's true.
Yeah.
Like, if half of the conspiracy theories about JFK are true,
that paints a whole different picture on what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. if half of the two gunmen on the grassy knoll, or half of the second gunman.
So yeah. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with those cities. Like, what's with New York, cities in California, Seattle. It seems the people being elected there are off their rocker.
Oh yeah,
and they are destroying everything they get their hands on, trying to dupe the rest of the country to follow along because it's the only way they're going to keep money flowing in and keep their power. All the while pretending, hey, we're looking out for the American people. But I think the Democrat Party, things keep up like this, they're going to end up splitting, because I know there's like a lot of, not necessarily libertarian, but just mainstream Democrats, like just normal Democrats, your normal people that, you know, are a little left-leaning, are getting tired of this nonsense because there's a lot of it they don't agree with. There are pro-life Democrats. There are common sense Democrats. They just have a slightly different way of viewing government's purpose or how to spend money or what should be provided. But at least, you know, they're common sense people. I think this progressive stuff is just because they somehow all got in power around the same time. I mean, how do we have Waters, Schiff, and Pelosi, 3 nut jobs, all from the same state?
Yeah, that's because California.
Yep. Oh, and then did you see the video when they were signing the articles of impeachment?
Oh, where Pelosi is using multiple pins and she's smiling
yeah,
about the
got a whole pile of commemorative pins, and she's sitting there smiling and
using a different pin to sign each letter.
Right, stating this is a somber moment, and we all need to take this in the retrospect that this is a tragic time for this country, that we have to proceed. Ready? Everybody sign commemorative pin? Just what is going on?
Commemorative, yeah. Like this is a moment to remember where.
Right, impeach the president. We've done it, people.
Yeah.
I mean, man, that's just nonsense.
Yeah, it's. So, what I hope is going to happen is that people are smarter than what the media and what the Democrats are giving them credit for, and all the people are looking at this and they're like, yeah, this is unfair. This is a mockery of justice. And they're probably going to look at it as like, okay, even if he's guilty of doing something like what they're talking about, no, it's not what. Even if he is somewhat guilty of doing something improper with Ukraine, what was happened to him is a mockery of justice and should not be allowed to continue. And they're just even if they hate Trump, they're probably gonna be like, okay, whatever. I'm either gonna not vote at all, or I'm gonna vote for Trump just to despite the what Democrats are doing. And I hope this leads to a complete reversal of Democrat control of the House of Representatives, and it's just a clean sweep for Republicans in 2020, and then maybe we can get something done.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, not we, but maybe they can get something done and get rid of all these
beneficial finally to the country.
Yeah, something that actually helps us out, and hopefully they can remove enough regulations and change enough of the American policies to possibly stave off or delay the upcoming inevitable economic crash that we're headed towards. That's if it doesn't happen in Trump's first term, more than likely it's going to happen in his second term, and that's.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if he gets reelected for a second term, because the markets looked very much like they were going to start crashing anytime soon. I remember, back in 2017, everyone's like, nope, we're all done. By 2018, we're crashed. But a lot of it got staved off because very shortly after Trump got elected, restrictions were kind of lifted.
Yep.
The energy sector had kind of a bit more freedom to just conduct business.
Yeah, and so some of those things led to, well, I mean, granted, some of this happened under Obama when it comes to natural gas and fracking and all that sort of things, but it was extended under Trump, and now the U.S. is entirely energy independent. That is a huge economic factor for,
Yeah. Well, he also was able to renegotiate NAFTA.
Yep.
Got a little bit better deal for us, and just in the last couple of weeks, we actually negotiated a deal with China because his tariffs worked.
Yeah. Which again, that's another that shouldn't have worked as effectively as they did. Okay, I'll take it. It's a win.
Yeah. I mean but it was that trade war between us and China that was also kind of one of those estimations as to why the economy would collapse as soon as it was expected. People were expecting it to.
Yeah. And now that is kind of resolved and in our favor, that's a huge. Granted, there's still sectors so the automotive sector, the housing sector, and the stock market itself that are bubbles that are eventually going to collapse. But as long as things keep progressing as they've gone, when they do collapse, it may not be as bad. Because right now, a lot of economists and people are looking at it and be like, yeah, if it collapses any time within the next few months or within Trump's first term, it's going to be worse than the 2006-2008 crash.
Yep.
But
I mean, if you have an independent energy sector that's actually doing very well economic-wise, that's going to help boost us.
Yeah.
Decline a lot faster.
Yeah. So if things can keep going at this rate for another 2 to 3 years, maybe when it crashes in 2 to 3 years as opposed to the next couple of months, it might be like, oh, well, there's a small recession. Some people are out of work. There's some layoffs. The economy is not growing as, there might be a bit of a recession, but it's not going to reach to the point of the 2008 crash. Hopefully that's the case, and hopefully it won't have this ripple effect to other countries and things like that, which also happened in 2008. So I think if this happens, say, like the second year of Trump's term, where the automotive and housing completely crash and all that, it's probably going to be isolated and contained at that point. That's my hope at this. But we will see, and we will keep praying for a better future, and praying that all this impeachment nonsense gets resolved, and we actually get, and it all blows up in the Democrats' face, which I think it's going to, because like I said, like I was like talking about a couple of weeks ago, it's like that scene from Joe Dirt where they thought they had a bomb and knocked the top of it, and it's an old crapper tank.
Well, I don't think what's going to happen is, again, the Democrat Party seems like it is, part of it is going more and just more progressive, extreme far left. And it does seem to be a lot of younger people that had that mentality. They're under this impression that government is supposed to provide everything. Life is supposed to be easy because we live in the greatest country ever. I shouldn't have to work this hard. I shouldn't have to pay for college, whatever. The younger generation is going to start voting more radical, as in Bernie bros. That's why I think Bernie poll numbers have shot up. Yeah, so they're not going to be voting for these Democrats that are the old school ones causing all the trouble to begin with. They seem like they're struggling just to keep the bit of power that they have right now.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that means voting for more people like AOC and Bernie. And that was the other thing that came out recently.
Right. Once the Democratic Party starts, that becomes the norm. Mm-hmm. I think your more moderate Democrats are going to split off, and they're going to actually divide their power in half. And the moderates are going to say, you know what? Done with this. I'm not necessarily Republican, but I'm not with them. Yeah. We're going back to more moderate. At least something could get done in the U.S. You know, Congress could get some things done with having a moderate Democrat and Republicans, and they weren't enemies.
Oh, and so we'll kind of wrap this up, but the one last thing I wanted to talk about was AOC's little interview on Martin Luther King Day. And I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but she talked about the Democrats being moderate or centrist. And she thinks she thinks that she is in the middle.
Yeah.
I was like,
I heard that.
I was like, yeah, so Crowder did a good breakdown of that, talking about all the things that Democrats are like, nope, you guys are on the extreme. There is no centrist viewpoint when it comes to abortion, gun rights, healthcare, socialism.
If she's thinking that's center, what does she think's on the left of that?
Yeah, I'm I have no idea.
Right up to the ledge and about to fall off and saying, nope, center.
But that's the scary thing. That's why so many Democrats describe, moderate Republicans and conservatives as being so far right. It's like, because they think they're in the middle. I'm like, how can you think you're in the middle? How can you possibly think that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question, is what is further left than AOC and Bernie?
Maybe they don't even know what left and right mean anymore. To them, or to her, it's just a dumb term that means alt-right or bad guys.
I don't know.
Left is good, or maybe she doesn't consider herself left. She really thinks herself center, and so she's not familiar with why people say far left. It's like, far left? Who are you talking about? I don't even know what that is. Like, no, that's you. So, I don't know if that's intentional or she's just really she's ignorant of the subject.
It's probably a combination of both. Like, it's intentional and she's really dumb.
Yeah. All
right. Well,
that was a scary thing to listen to. I don't think I got through the rest of her conversation at that. I was like, nope, I can't listen to this right now.
Yeah, like the most extreme example I can think of somebody on the far left thinks she's a centrist. What?
Yeah.
So.
Oh, there's another thing I didn't want to bring up for ending the stream. There was 2 marches that happened in the past week.
Oh, the gun march and then the women's march.
Oh no, that would be the third one. I forgot all about that in Virginia.
Yeah.
And the news said a lot of potential. There's expected violence.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. No injuries. No gun fights. Nothing. And that's.
That's the way it's supposed to be done, and they should be fighting for that because.
Yeah.
They can't just do that. That is not constitutional at all. They can't just start signing in all these restrictive gun rights.
Mm-hmm. So what were the other two marches? So there was the Women's March.
For Life and the Women's March.
Okay, so I was not even aware of the March for Life, because that's... I hadn't heard anything about that.
Yep, so those happened recently, and I was hearing reports that there was well over 100,000 people at the March for Life. Some reports I've heard could be closer to 500,000, which that's a massive group.
Yeah, so I think that's the one they do like every year, right? The March for Life.
Okay.
Usually that is over 200,000 people at least.
And Trump will get this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard anything about it, so that's.
Yep. Yeah, he gave a speech and said he's fighting for human life. So I think people used to say Trump is a pro-choice guy. I believe he's more of he doesn't believe in it, but he doesn't think we should be forcing an option that you cannot have it or something like that. But I think he is a pro-life.
No, he on the campaign trail he addressed this. He said he used to be pro-choice, but then he's changed his opinion as new information, and now he is pro-life. So that's one of the points he was talking about on the campaign trail. So he is staunchly pro-life.
Saying he's a president here now fighting for life.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good. I think that resonated with a lot of people. And then on the Women's March, the rounded estimate was like 10,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's because half of them are the nut jobs running around saying F men, F Trump, F the
there's
US.
There's a couple of videos going around about that, the lady who's got the two middle fingers and saying F patriarchy, and it's like F patriarchy for the entire universe, or for every universe, or something like that.
Do you even know half the stuff coming out of your mouth? What you're saying? You don't know.
Yeah, she said she said F transphobia, and then she said F something else, and then she's like, oh yeah, F transphobia. It's like, okay.
Yeah, F Islamophobia. I'm like, but I don't think that's what you're talking about, nor are you Islamic, so I don't know what you're even.
Yeah, but then she also said F anti-Semitism, and I'm like, wait a minute.
But I did hear something funny because there was another interviewer guy asking people around, and there was no one wearing, pretty much nobody wearing those pink hats that became popular like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so he's like, so what happened with all those hats? And they're like, well, we found that was pretty offensive because not every woman's is that color. They come in different colors and sizes, so they were offended at their own hats.
See, I thought they would be offended because, like, well, not all women have a vagina, but it's like, no, not all of them have the same color.
Like, as a second thought or a secondary, also not all women, but that was the main reason. Is a lot of people found it offensive because it was just one color, and they come in various colors, and I'm like, it was a stupid hat to begin with, but it was your hat.
Yeah.
And everybody was wearing those at your march like 2 years ago. You have offended yourself.
Yeah, so Crowder had to change my mind at that, and so there's a little preview, or I guess not really a preview, but did you see that where the two transgender people are attacking him for his signs?
Well, the worst part was the transgender person just kind of nuts.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Well, I just really turned into a woman, and you could see everyone kind of like, what? So he walking by at the end of the video, threw something at Crowder, and then tried to run off, and you could hear him like clopping around and almost falling over.
So the thing about that.
And then he's like, oh yeah, very appropriate, sweetheart. And then she turns over and he's like, that's technically assault. And then the lady's looking at him, she's like, oh, you're fine. You could just see Crowder's face like getting real pissed off.
Yeah, and he's like,
tell me I'm fine when they got thrown at me.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, that comment was uncalled for, but him throwing something at me, you're fine. What? Like that's obviously the more severe of the two interactions is that throwing something at
it ended, and he's just like, you know what? I think you need to check your bias and privilege.
Yeah. So if you read the comments or whatever, so the thing he threw a Tupperware thing at him, but he stole that from a homeless guy in the alley behind Crowder because during the video there's some guy with this mangy beard that comes up and is trying to get his Tupperware thing back.
Yeah, that I didn't know about. That's funny.
So the transgender person like walked all the way around, went to some alley behind him, grabbed a thing from a homeless guy and threw it at Crowder. Yeah, I mean, a very stable individual there.
Like that person was saying, I've been raped 4 times and my friends have been raped multiple times. I'm like, where do you live and why do you keep going there?
Yeah, what? Well, the other thing, yeah, how do you...
How does that happen more than once? And to your friends are all getting raped. What?
Yeah, but also, yes, rape occurs. That's not the same thing as rape culture, because the sign he said is rape culture is a myth. That doesn't mean rape doesn't happen. That means we don't have a culture that encourages it.
Yeah. So I don't know. That whole conversation was funny. I would like to see when the rest comes out. I think it's supposed to be out tomorrow.
Yes, it's coming out tomorrow. That's
I kind of like those change my mind segments.
Yeah, although it has kind of shifted. Like when he originally started, it was actually supposed to be, okay, maybe I'm missing something, change my mind, provide me information that changes my mind, and now it's kind of be like, okay, so maybe it's just a civil conversation, and now there's not trying to actually change anybody's mind. I mean, granted, it wasn't likely that he was going to change his mind or he was going to change the other person's mind. Although he has had a couple where somebody else, some of the people who were like, okay, yeah, I hadn't considered that. Yeah, like that one guy who was talking about, I was like, well, first when I sat down, I was like, it is kind of, it's not racist, but now I'm kind of thinking. So there's a little bit of that is going on, and that's, but it's not likely that somebody's going to change Crowder's mind because he has more information than most of the people he's talking to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's got notebooks and stuff. I saw the abortion one. He's got all these pictures flipping through. So, I mean, he's going there prepared. But I think it's a nice platform to be able to see a real non-pre-programmed discussion. Mm-hmm. So it's 2 people deposing ideas, and you do get to see what people think on the other side. And then you also get to see rebuttal tactics or, you know.
Yeah, and he's surprisingly good at it. So I don't know if you saw, there's it is almost 10 o'clock, but there's a video, I don't know if you watched the Charisma on Command.
Charisma on Command?
Yeah, it's a channel that breaks down, so they did, Charisma on Command did one about the Change My Mind segments, and they were talking about instances where Crowder was like, okay, that right there was a bad, that right there did not help the conversation or the situation. Something Crowder did where he was basically insulting his opponent or whatever. Yeah, that completely destroyed all the trust he had kind of built up before then. But then there's other points where he's talking, I was like, yeah, see, right there, what he's doing is, he's acknowledging the other person, their perspective. He's building that relationship, and it's allowing that conversation to continue. And so it's basically a breakdown of some of these segments. I was like, wow, that was a really, really good analysis of it. Basically pointing out some of the things that he's doing within these conversations that actually keep them civil. Like he hears like, something's going a little up. He pulls it back on the rails, or maybe stops talking about the controversial thing and starts talking about like their history and things along those lines, building up that rapport again before going back into the controversial topic that's kind of rubbing the other person the wrong way. It's like, yeah, so he's doing all those things, whether they're conscious or subconscious, but he's employing these tactics, and they're very effective. Whether they're effective at changing the other person's mind or not necessarily, but they're very effective at keeping the conversation going and remaining civil without both people just becoming a shouting match between the two. So he's really good at diffusing when it's a possible chance of destroying the. Although there's certain times where the other person just kind of is like, oh yeah, this is, yeah, you weren't serious or legitimate about having a conversation. You're just here to yell at me. So there's a couple instances where Crowder's like, yeah, not interested, and kind of breaks it. Breaks the rapport by insulting the other person or something like that. But it's a pretty good analysis. But the Charisma on Command is a pretty interesting channel. They break down like movie scenes or actors' interviews and stuff like that, and basically pointing out things that either make you more confident or different mannerisms that make more people attracted to you or want to be around you, sort of thing.
Okay.
It's a pretty interesting channel. Lots of food for thought. But I think it's the last thing. Yeah, yeah, the last thing. Another 20 minutes of last things. But that's all I had for this week. And sorry about being sick. Nothing I could do about that. But from here on out, should be back to Mondays every week from for the foreseeable future. And I will definitely look more into LBRY and kind of do, I guess, a more thorough analysis of that. Probably not next week, but maybe excuse me, maybe a couple of weeks, like maybe about a month from now, I'll break down the full thing, because now they've got a lot more information, and seems to be a lot more stuff to look into as far as LBRY getting everything set up and looking at how it could actually monetize this, because whether you're creating content or not, there definitely seems to be a way of making some kind of income out of this. Cording was talking about just starting a channel on this and already having a couple $100. Was like, okay, maybe. No, there's the other thing is Styx and Quartering were talking about this being kind of a more active platform. Like they're getting more interactions on BitChute and other platforms outside of YouTube, because YouTube right now requires monetization. If your video isn't monetized, it's not getting out to new people. And whereas they're seeing more growth on these other platforms. So it's like, well, so my channel has been kind of dead for forever. So this is something maybe it would be worth doing the little 5 to 10 minute videos I used to do in addition to streaming. Maybe it would be worth it to start doing those and putting it on this LBRY channel. Man,
could be.
So if there's a chance for growth and or possible monetization, that's something I'm looking for. Because right now this is just kind of a fun little hobby, but if I could turn it into something more, that's what I'm looking for. I mean, I like my job, but I do not want to remain at my job. I'm looking for anything and everything to quit my job and become my own boss. So if I could do that by creating a little podcast or something like that, I'm trying to do that. That would be very fun and interesting. All right. So with that note, we're going to go ahead and close it out. And I do see there was a comment here, but that's from Brandon. I don't know if but so he posted this, but that was before the stream even started. So it's like he just says,
yeah, I didn't see any new comments. He said, let's get this started or something.
Yeah, let's get the show on the road. And that was posted like around 7 o'clock. And the stream was supposed to start at 7:10. That's what I had it posted for. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end it. Thanks for anybody who does end up watching this. Again, trying to keep these going starting next Monday. So thanks for joining me, and see you then.